Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Longhouse, a show about art, culture, politics, philosophy, etc., 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 all with a true right Nordic perspective. I'm glad I made it on time today. I try to make a point of starting these streams at the moment that I advertise, but today was a bit of a close call. I've been running around today doing a bit of minor tasks, you know how it can be sometimes, but I'm also in the middle of remodeling one of our spare bedrooms. So at the moment I'm at the point where I'm applying, I guess the English call it plaster, some Americans call it mudding. It's basically the mass you apply after you have fastened the drywall to the studs. And this whole process where you have to apply it and then you have to wait for 24 hours before you can sand it and then reapply it. So it's this fun little game in between work and everything else you have to do to try to time exactly when you can get in the next layer of plaster before when it's dry, so that it's closer to the point where I can paint the room or do the rest of it. But that makes it even better that I am surrounded by wonderful, knowledgeable people of the community that are more than willing to indulge my wishes when I basically tell them that, hey, let's do a stream about fairy tales. And they always bring the A game. And on that note, welcome back, Luddic Path, as always.
Thank you very much. Happy to be back as usual. It must be some type of weird synchronicity because my day was also like this. I'm not in the middle of renovations, but I have just like 100 different tasks I have to run back and forth between, and I just barely made it back in the like the 10 minutes before we went on stream. But we pride ourselves on being punctual here. So far, I think we're 10 for 10 on starting on time.
I think so.
Yes.
Some would say it's the way of the factory worker, but at the same time, I think it's important to be somewhere when you tell people that you're supposed to be there at a certain time. It's the polite thing to do. I can't shake it.
We need to build up that reputation first, so we can subvert it later. And
yes,
yeah,
because that's what it's all about: subverting expectations.
Yes. So it has to be there first. So.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I enjoy renovations too. I'm not in the middle of it currently, but I can relate to what you're saying there. I think it's fun to plaster, or I don't know like the what's the proper word for it, because it seems like when the Brits talk about plastering, they talk about this kind of liquid drywall thing, which
I suppose that's the whole wall. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not even sure.
Some Americans, as I said, some call it mudding, but I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, it's nice work. It's kind of the kind of work where you can sort of put on some music and then just have a good time with it, and get it to the point where you want it.
I think it's kind of meditative sometimes. I just like to do these things, and I don't have to think about anything. There's no, it's not too much complexity unless you're dealing with some really like specific case in the renovations. But you know, yeah, too much renovational talk. We're not that kind of show. I think
no,
by the way, we should
be for a different show or a different stream where we talk about renovations.
The Norwegian slow TV, so we just turn on the camera and just do modding, basically for 24 hours. No, I think you should trademark the true right term. By the way, I've not heard it used.
I've been using it from like the second or third episode on, because I feel like that I feel like it has a better ring to it than alternative right or dissident right, etc., because it also sort of hammers home that the right that you find in the mainstream today isn't anywhere close to actual quote unquote traditional right positions, which is why I'm using it.
Absolutely. And I mean, with this episode, you know, I've been, let's say I've had some input on the content in the last ones, and usually when I do this, things get a little dark. You get a little bit in the.
They have a tendency to do, yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm just like that kind of as a personality. But this time we're taking a break, at least a little bit, from some of the darker, more painful stuff, and we're gonna look at something cozy and
We're
something.
gonna have a bit of a wholesome
Yeah,
pill today, boys. Yeah.
it's the Chad folklore appreciator stream.
Yes. And on that note, welcome back, fellow art appreciator Vingo.
Hello, good to be back. I can't blame any renovations or menial tasks in the home for being sort of slow today, but I made a few notes about half an hour ago, and I read some folk tales last night. I have my Asbjørnsen og Moe collection right beside me here.
Very nice.
So yeah, I'm just getting through actually a very mild cold, but I don't know if my voice is gonna start sounding very nasal, or maybe it already is. But so I hope I can bring the live up to the A game promise. Anyway. So.
I think you sound great. You seem to have found a good mic as well. So.
Oh yeah. At least the audio quality is much better, if not the voice itself. So yeah, happy about that.
I did 2 weeks ago. I did order a Norwegian folktale in like translated to English book, but it is estimated to arrive tomorrow, so it was just a day late. But I was able to acquire some translated ones online, and so I've been reading up on some of those, been doing some notes on my own, and we're going to be using a slideshow that Logic Path has put together to get us through this. But it's going to be a bit of more of a discussion than a presentation, maybe. I think we're going to sort of play it a bit by ear here.
Yes, there's no sort of rigid program that we have planned, and I'm not a folklorist or any kind of expert. We weren't able to bring anybody in, but being Norwegian, I have at least some relation to these things from your childhood, or maybe from second or third sources. So I think it's interesting to revisit some of these things and maybe look back at it from more of this true right perspective and see what we can find there.
I'm not sure how it is in other Nordic countries or in other countries in general in Europe, but there's been a lot of talk lately about the importance of stories and the importance of the sort of the oral tradition, I suppose, in right-wing circles, which is what triggered me to do the stream here, quite literally taking these stories to mean fairy tales, etc. But I think there's the one of the book I read, one of the books I managed to acquire had a preface saying that interpreting these kinds of stories as mere children's tales are to sort of underestimate them tenfold or something like that. And there is a lot of sort of like eternal truths in here, and there's characters that represent people you meet in real life, and there's lessons that stand the test of time if you look close enough. And being a part, and these stories being a part of your culture and your upbringing, they do certainly influence you, I think, which is why it's important to keep them alive if possible. I get a feeling that a lot of the modern media, to put it this way, that children are exposed to builds on, I mean, that's pretty obvious. I think they build on nothing, or at least a different religion than the one ours is built on.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think we all, maybe I'm youngest here, I don't know, but we all grew up with VHS cassettes, I'm sure, and of course we had the Disney blockbusters like The Lion King, and the older ones like the Robin Hood film from '73, I think. But I think pretty much everyone our age also had some Ivo Caprino films, and we will get into that. He filmatized, of course, quite a few of the Norwegian folktales. So I certainly watched those again and again growing up.
I also had cassettes of like audiobooks or I guess radio plays is more correct to put it like that, of various fairy tales, if I remember correctly.
Yes, we get into Ivo Caprino, I think, later in this. I also have very cherished childhood memories of it. And of course, I had to go back and look at some of them again. It was quite enjoyable because, like, in my child mind, thinking back at it, I remembered, okay, this is some stop motion thing. But I watched it again, I realized, well, it's not stop motion. It's actually some very kind of groundbreaking, at least at the time, puppet technology that they're using to just run these puppets and have them moving live. And it was very sort of ahead of anything else at the time.
Yes. It's certainly an artistic, or I suppose you could call it a technical marvel in a sense. Those movies or videos.
Because we all watch Academic Agent, and he will bring up some of these like British child TV shows, say like Thomas the Tank Engine or Trumpton. But I'm sorry to say, and I didn't want this to be like a trash talking chauvinist show, but like these Ivo Caprino things, they just kind of trash these British TV shows. They're like on like 5 levels above in terms of actual ability to animate these characters and make them come alive.
Agreed.
But before that, we are going to get into a little bit of current events, as we usually do, while we wait. Well, we spend quite a lot of time on the intro, but while we wait a little bit more for people to trickle in, and I see some people have started chatting. If you have any comments, please post them in the chat. If you have any specific questions, we'll deal with them if relevant. If not, we'll round them up at the end of the stream. And with that, I will add the presentation to the stream, and I also see that Nordanon has commented on our Protestant work ethnic grind set. Ethic, sorry. Protestant work ethic grind set. Sure.
I like the ethnic grind set version, but yeah.
Okay, so Ludwig Path, you have been you've
yeah,
made me aware of the story of Alan Hendrickson, the sad tale of the Norwegian teacher.
I had to put some depressing stuff in this one as well. Sorry, but I thought it was. I mean, we gotten into the habit of doing like a current events bit before we get into the main course of these streams.
Do you want me to share the article on screen?
Well, yeah, you could do that too. So we'll just look at it from there. We get to revisit Reset once again. So I think that's pretty cool. This is a story it's only been broken by Reset. But it's not a fake news story. It's just that all of the other big mainstream Norwegian papers, it's basically like Ukraine rah. That's the only thing, like we moved from the illness rah, and now it's just Ukraine all day.
Considering sort of the spectacle, quote unquote, of this story, it's one of those. As I said, when we were talking in the pre-show, it's one of those cathedral moments that no one else but Reset, the quote unquote evil right wing paper, is the only one covering this.
Yes, and I think that's where Reset is actually good, even though it's kind of schlocky on the academic sort of high-end quality. It's good in terms of just getting stories and getting interviews with people and being able to just take on these things that other people don't want to touch because they're considered, so toxic, quote unquote, already. But to like the in medias res, exciting explanation here is that you have this teacher who, after being fired, went into a hospital, basically signed away, like he signed himself on as an organ donor, and he just went into a room and shot himself. I think at the age of 40. And he has a YouTube channel that's called Alan Hendrickson. where he just documents basically every part of his trial, from the day that he was fired to like all of the accusations to the last video. It's all still up on YouTube as far as I'm aware, where he's basically lost the case and he's decided to take his own life. So he just goes through his apartment and he just explains like, okay, my sister's gonna get these books and my brother's gonna get this, and just talks about how sad everything is. It's a bit of a downer there. But the interesting thing, and the reason that I thought this was relevant to bring up, is that I have some experience from a similar situation in my own life, and I've sort of seen how like this process looks from the inside and on the outside. So, I mean, why did this happen in the first place? This man is a gym teacher. Basically, he's has the degree of a lector, which means it's like a 5-year degree. Probably like a 3-year degree of physical education with a 2-year degree of like pedagogy attached to it, where you're then qualified to teach on like a high school and like early college bachelor level. He was brought in then to a school in Lillestrøm to be a gym teacher, basically to take over for like a previous gym teacher, and he was told that they had a problem with grading in gym, is that they'd taken this very pleasing approach, this sort of appeasement approach, where almost everybody got like a 5 or a 6 in gym. For the American viewers, there are British viewers. The Norwegian school system, the grades are basically scaled from, say, 1, which is like absolute failure level, to 6, which is considered like a very high performance. And it's not like an American A. American A's are a lot more inflated. It's not uncommon where you could have an American class where, say, 50% of the class gets an A, but usually, at least in my experience in Norway, it's quite difficult to get this absolute top grade. But they had basically, the school in Lillestrøm had gone this appeasement route of giving all of the students the very high grades, and this guy was brought in to sort of try to mitigate that a bit. And he has a type of personality, which is the kind of teacher that you want to have, but not the kind of teacher who is going to work well in a type of like large bureaucratic school system. If you have this type of personality where you just tend to speak your mind about things and act honestly, like the cathedral, as Walrus said, the cathedral can't handle these types of people. So he ended up then trying to grade students differently.
I will add that this might be different from when I was in middle school, but from what I remember, gym class had quite like, because it's gym, you have, well, when I went, at least, it was very like, if you get like 5 push-ups, you get a C. If you get 15, you get an A, right? There was very like hard line numeric measurements. So I don't know if they've changed that, if it's just like, oh, you participated, so you get an A. I don't know, but I mean, you can see where the conflict arises, I suppose, when some softer people are sad that they couldn't do the 15 push-ups.
Yes, I mean, that's really the situation that they were in here, where people already had very high grades, and in his class, almost everybody was docked in grades, because he was very much about like paying attention to how much they could do and how well they performed. So everybody was docked in grades. Everybody were unhappy about it. And then this leads to a large influx of complaints from parents who feel sort of entitled to having their kids have high grades. And I guess there's something about that principle that it's harder to lose something than to, there's more pain in what you have and that you lose than what you could have gotten.
Right.
And the parents start complaining. This apparently creates a lot of paperwork for like the higher ups, like the principal, the inspectors, and the people in the sort of the top of the bureaucracy of this school. And usually, if that happens and they're not able to mitigate that, or they're not able to find a way to get the teacher who's causing this to comply, then they will basically have to fire this person. That is how it's done. They're not really interested in, like, the people, in my experience, the people in these high bureaucracies, they're not interested in taking a bullet to sort of fix the system. They want to just try to keep all the stakeholders, quote unquote, happy. And if that means inflating the grades, giving, making a mockery out of the diploma, just turning the system to shit over time, then they will do that. And just try to fire these people who are kind of firebrands who will try to reform the system from the bottom. So this is what happens, is that they're going to start a process it has to follow basically the Norwegian laws, is what you have, what's called the arbeidsmiljøloven. That's the work environment law that has all of these requirements in terms of you need to have a certain amount of meetings, you need to have coaching, you need to have communication, there needs to have been substantial complaints.
It's a law that generally makes it harder to fire people outright.
Yes.
But at the same time, it also just sort of clearly, well, I suppose you'll get into it, but it also, if you can just acquire the bureaucratic tools, you can more or less just bypass
yes, that's
truth and justice.
It's kind of the point. I mean, it's not like Texas where you have the fire at will, hire at will laws. There's a very long process to do it, but like Walrus said, it's like, I compare it to basically if you want to put up a new building, that you have to buy a plot of land and you have to get prepared, prepared drawings by architects, and then you need to consult
permissions,
zoning permissions. Yeah. You have to consult the bureaucracies about the building quality, and then you have to get send out certain paperwork to the neighbors and the people who are affected. But assuming that you've done everything by the book, there's almost nothing anyone else can do to stop you, even if the neighbors have valid complaints that you're going to destroy the views, destroy property values, anything. As long as you've done everything properly, then you're pretty much good. And that's very much what happens with these firing processes. And in this case, I think that you have a man who's very sincere, who sort of believes in the system. And when he gets put into this mill, you could say, this kind of swamp of paperwork, he's very has a very direct and honest approach to it. He doesn't really see that this is kind of a plot. This is sort of an open conspiracy in a sense to get rid of him. So he will try to honestly interact with these points. And when he gets fired, when he gets burnt with this process, he will sort of sit there and feel like justice has been violated, in a sense. Like it's that's one of the things he said in the last video: no justice, no life. He just repeated it multiple times. So it was sort of I think he was really worn out by going back into court, having to argue this case over and over again, and then just getting shut down. He's spent a lot of time in these videos where he will go through every accusation that's made against him. And here you really see this kind of cathedral conspiracy where there's, they bring up students that have accused him of, say, transphobia, for instance. There's a sort of deaf male to female transgender in my class who accused me of transphobia, which nobody else heard, but this student, it was real in my mind. And then he proved that, nobody else heard.
Keeping in mind that this guy was a teacher, I think, from 2013 to 2017 without any complaints, really.
Yes. So it sort of starts when the people were docking their grades, and all of these students were coming in with these complaints, we were being harassed, and he was showing us pornography, he was sharing the videos, and he went through all of it. And it's basically, it's not substantial. Even their parents would come out and just make up stuff because there's created a sort of atmosphere where that's allowed. And that's kind of the cathedral solution to this, is that they're not going to directly attack you.
Everyone is served by not letting sort of justice be done, basically. The parents can go back to having kids with high grades. The kids don't have to do any work. The teachers can breathe a sigh of relief that they weren't targeted, and they can go back to appeasing the parents, etc., etc.
So that's exactly correct, as you say. And coming back to it, they had all the paperwork finished. They basically had it, say hundreds of complaints. And even if you can prove that, say, 80 of them are complete falsifications, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. They've checked all the boxes for getting you out of the system. And it's really a mistake to try to engage honestly with this process. And that's where he went wrong. That's sort of the problem with being kind of this sincere, person who tries to make an effort to reform the system, and they just swat you back down, basically. So I mean, we look through some of it.
A paragraph here where they brought on a couple of teachers from the school he worked at, and the teachers Reese had spoke to also deny that Alan ever showed any racist attitudes. We're all accused of that, says one. Apparently it has been increasingly common for students to pull the racism card when they are criticized by teachers. I never thought Alan was a racist, says one who knew him well. Could be crass, but never based on skin color, we are told.
I wonder why.
We're accused of racism all the time. It is widespread in the secondary schools, but we cannot stop pointing out bad behavior just because someone has a darker complexion. Oof, getting spicy there, buddy.
But if you go back to the presentation and you look at the next slide, I just wanted to make a couple of points. Let's see, like this, what I call like the rules for radicals. If you are a person who find yourself in this situation here, because I assume, I mean, people in this circle, I would assume that they've wised up a little bit, but you might know somebody who is sort of sincere and who want to actually make changes in bureaucracies. So like rule number one, as I put it here, like don't be Robin Williams. Like this idea of like the soul reformer. I don't know if any of you have seen the Dead Poets Society of like Patch Adams. I think you have more Robin Williams films where he sort of comes in as like this eccentric idealist into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's going to transform it with a song and a wink, basically.
Song and a wink and just enchanting magic. I mean, it doesn't always work out for him well, but it is a kind of psyop in a sense, like to create this thing in media. I mean, I'm looking at getting into spicier topics on other streams, but like the idea of like the lone serial killer being a psyop, but also like the lone system reformer is kind of a psyop, honestly. If you don't have any,
that, the whole if you just believe hard enough, you can change the world, and
yes.
That sort of leading people into the spider's web, so to speak.
Yeah, you're just leading them into the mouth of Moloch. So yeah, don't be a Robin Williams. No insider help, no reform. If you don't have anybody in the system that believes in you, like nothing's going to happen. You're just going to create a sort of friction there, a kind of friend-enemy between you and the ruling bureaucracy. And guess who wins? Like the house always wins in the end, right?
You see it in the article we just showed as well. I mean, there were teachers there who basically agree with him, who say, well, he's a nice guy and he's a good teacher and we don't think he deserved to be fired. But I mean, where were they, right?
Yeah, no, they don't wield any power in the system at all. I mean, you have a lot of these.
That's what I'm saying, right there.
Yeah.
The people who might actually agree with you aren't, as long as you're separated in that manner, you're not going to achieve anything.
Exactly. So, I mean, it made me think of like films that are a bit more realistic if you've seen Gattaca, like that, I think with Ethan Hawke, it's a science fiction film about genetic engineering, where he is sort of allowed to rise in the ranks of this system, even though he's kind of like a genetically inferior specimen. But it only works because he has help from like doctors and other people in the system who actually want to help him. It's you can't do it by yourself.
Is Gattaca the one where they have like where he plays like he plays like he's genetically inferior to his brother or something? Or is that a different movie?
No, that's that movie where he was born naturally, like he's sort of a rogue in the future where everybody is using genetic engineering and these in vitro fertilization to get like the perfect baby from mommy and daddy. He's like just a natural born person where he's, strong in some senses, but he has like bad eyesight and he's short and, some other problems that he has. So he's just relegated to be in the lower strata of society, but he is able to kind of move higher and become an astronaut because he has some people in the system that wants to help him up. So if you're not in that position, then don't try to go for any of this reform stuff. Just be like a passive kind of active nihilist. Try to ride out the tiger in the system, and get the money and get the benefits. There's no reason to fight the house. And if you do
You should
find
get the
yourself,
money and you should put them towards the Longhouse. Not that we have
yes,
any
but
donation links, but
we have to with the Bitcoin wallet here. We take Ethereum and Monero.
yes.
So, but what if you do end up finding yourself in the situation where you're called into these meetings and they start seeming like building this conspiracy against you? You seek an alternative settlement, meaning that you kind of just accept that, okay, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. You try to get, if they place you in some other school or get a package of just say, or you can quit yourself, start looking for another job while this process is going on. So you can just quit voluntarily. No harm done. Start with a new job or ask them. I mean, if you're employed with the government, then the government is the only employer, basically, for that type of job. If it's within the school or sort of child protective services, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So just see if they can place you in another department or in another city or something like that. That usually works out better, in my experience, than trying to fight this out to the end in the court like this guy did.
In general, that probably works as well, because the bureaucrats who handle your case usually would be better off just sort of shuffling you around than actually having to deal with firing you.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. They want as little work as possible. So if it's less work for them to just move you to another department in another city, then just do that. But yeah, I think that's all I have on this one. I hope this was public service announcements to dissidents in bureaucratic systems.
Luckily, I'm not in any state bureaucratic system. God, I can't imagine willingly going into the lion's den. It's bad enough that I have to pay taxes to it. Anyway.
Yes, but not everybody can code, so you take the jobs you can get.
Just learn to code. All right. Let's get in on the Norwegian folklore, which is the main topic of the stream. Now, I've always seen, and I'm sure this isn't new, but I feel like the aesthetics of the Germanic and Nordic folklores are something a bit different from what you get in a lot of other, especially English folklore. The aesthetics are very different than English or French or other sort of continental histories. What do you guys think?
Well, I have noticed that too. I'm not able to, I don't have a good aesthetic mind in the way that I have the vocabulary to really pin that down, but I have noticed that there are sort of distinct differences, particularly doing this show and researching some of this stuff. I've gotten more aware of the sort of Scandinavian aesthetic in terms of how things look, and the German aesthetic. But I recognize it when I see it, but I have trouble trying to really explain it in a kind of artistic sense. I don't know if Wingle has any input.
I think he might be away for a moment. I see it in the private chat he wrote a minute ago. He can comment when he gets back. There's something about, and I lack the vocabulary as well probably, but there's something about the roots, or I suppose the soil where it comes from, in terms of the forests and the mountains and life in general in these countries that conjures up a certain slightly darker or twisted, I suppose, imagery than you get in a lot of the again the English or more sort of Arthurian legends, etc., that are a lot more well, to us, I guess they're more standard these days, but I would say they're more they're a bit more high fantasy or heroic in that sense. The Scandinavian seems to be a bit more. It's a bit more focused on sometimes trickery, on outsmarting your enemies, etc. But Vingle, I don't know if you caught the last couple of minutes.
I did, yeah. I just had to go fix something, but I put the show on the headphones, so I caught what you guys said. I would say I would like to just start out by mentioning the Old Norse sagas. I mean, I grew up on anecdotes from the sagas told by my father and my grandfather growing up, and what becomes very apparent very quickly is the first of all, the language is very sort of I wouldn't like to say coarse because it can be beautiful as well, but it certainly gets to the point very quickly when something dramatic happens. For instance, like in the Heimskringla by Snorre Sturlason, and but you also see this in the fairy tales collected by Asbjørnsen and Moe, that it's written in a very matter-of-fact manner. When, for example, Askeladden, who we will get into later, he just chops the heads of the trolls off or whatever.
And, sometimes the line is basically from one line to the next. And then he chopped his head off, pretty much.
Yeah. It's very unsentimental.
Yeah.
You could say, and this is also true of the Icelandic, or you could also call them Norwegian, practically sagas, that they're quite neutral, and people have observed that they work in a way as a precursor to modern history writing, actually, because in comparison to Tacitus or Tacitus and other ancient writers, they at least seemingly are very unbiased. They report what happens and leave it at that. And if there are several accounts of a tale, the saga writer will, by the way, these sagas were written around 1200 plus minus. He will say that some people say that this happened, others will say that, and but this is also true of the. I would say the Old Norse saga writing is it's written as if it's carved in stone, like the runes themselves. You know, it's not so flowery. It's very and sentimental.
It's straight. It's to the point. It's flowery, I suppose, evocative, to use a word, in a very different sense, because it does conjure up imagery that. Line between truth, fiction, between sort of historical fact and legend, which, depending on who you ask, might be as well as true. I'm sure at some point we'll. Sometimes I see a lot of people who are in the sort of the Evola circles that I end up in, usually on Twitter and such. There's frequent discussions about how true stories of Atlantis, for example, were, and sort of this, how true, quote unquote, modern history is compared to ancient history. And when you
stop, Walrus. We're losing the centrists.
Oh no,
we're losing the centrists.
Look,
stop! Don't bring up Atlantis.
I'm not weighing in on the topic. I'm just saying that once you start, like, why should we believe modern history more than ancient history? Is my point, right? And you get that too in the you get this like strange blend in the Nordic ones. Is my point.
This conversation could veer off into sort of esoteric Graham Hancock territory with mentions of Atlantis and Lemuria. But I brought Lemuria into it. But just to get back to what you said about the aesthetic, Theodor Kittelsen is for me the prime example of the Scandinavian, or I would say Norwegian, of course, in particular, aesthetic.
Yes, it's there's some very good paintings that we're going to take a look at later.
Yeah, and he, I think it's interesting. I mean, he sort of pinpointed and brought back to the Norwegian people what Norwegian folk soul looks like. I mean, we have an expression folkesjela, which in the literal translation is folk soul, and of course, I said earlier I wouldn't use the word coarse as in rough, or I mean it can be quite rough, the language of the folk tales and the sagas, but there is definite beauty and subtlety and nuance there as well, and yeah, we will see that when we get to
As
the
you said, they're written as if they're carved out of stone, and there's a beauty to the what is the saying that brevity is the soul of wit? Is that it? Like if you can get all of this into like as little space as possible, that's a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, and Kittelsen definitely brought sort of subconscious elements both in the individual and in the folk soul, as I say, to bear in his paintings and drawings in a very succinct manner.
Yeah. All right, let's get into a bit more about what Ludwig here has called folkloristics.
No, it's an actual term. So that's
is
why I
it?
put
Sorry.
the point there with the. No, I mean I thought it was a joke as well, but I did a little bit of research there before, and it is actually an academic field called folkloristics, about trying to study and categorize and understand it. So that's why I linked the Arne Thompson Uther Index.
Yeah, I'm sharing it now.
Click on that link. This is basically like an indexing system for folk tales. We're in sort of the Indo-European tradition. I mean, and this is like it's not just old folk tales. Like, this website is so old. This is like the sort of XML.
This is how the web should be, by the way.
You can say, I mean, you don't have any fancy search indexing functions there, but you could browse stories. Click there, and you could go by origin, for instance. You probably find Norway here. I mean, it's quite comprehensive.
And they're like cross-referenced as well, so you get like when you click on one, you can see like other folk tales from different like places in the world, and what sort of themes that connect between them.
Yes. And then you have like the ATU. That's it has a number there. That's a sort of classification to the kind of archetype or the common theme there. I think if you click on classification
or
from
header
the
data, maybe. No,
from the bullet point menu in the on the left.
I got to go classification here. Yeah.
Yep. So there you can see the okay, here's the kind of compendium of the styles, or the kind of say loosely coupled themes that recur in these tales.
Yep.
Yeah,
Man marries the princess.
Sorry, Warren. You could basically say that they follow a sort of formula, and of course, this comes out subconsciously as well. But
this one's good.
Yeah.
Well, yes, of course, and that's why this is interesting, because you can see these archetypal. I mean, it's what's bound, or sort of what binds the foundation of what. Hang on a second. I'm having a moment here. What's his name? No, Joseph Campbell. It's sort of what binds his like hero with a thousand faces theory, that a lot of these archetypes, a lot of these quote unquote eternal truths are defined across cultures, across ages, etc. Now, I'm not saying that Joseph Campbell necessarily got it 100% right, but that's also the method that Julius Evola uses, say in the he says it himself in Revolt Against the Modern World, that his whole sort of method of trying to rediscover capital T tradition is like a sailor navigating by the stars, and this sort of has the same sort of effect where you can see that, all right, various different cultures have the same ideas when it comes to core truths, and so that must mean, I think, that there's something to it.
Oh yes, I included a bullet point on Joseph Campbell as well. So just to give my own 5 cents on Campbell here, I have read The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and it's a bit of a critique here is that I think it's too easy to read it and then try to shoehorn everything into this type of hero's journey template. Because when I looked at a lot of these stories, a lot of them don't really seem to follow the standard hero's journey structure. They have a certain structure to them that is repeated across different cultures, but it's not the hero's journey. Like it's,
I think his fault is that he created the hero's journey out of them. And I heard someone say one time that sort of the hero with 1,000 faces isn't the way to explain folk tales, it's the way to explain American media from like the 1960s onward.
Yes, because people read that book and they started to use that as a template for.
I don't remember where
films.
I heard that.
But it's
a podcast or something.
It's perfectly sums up how I feel about it as well. Because these tales are a lot more diverse than what you'd see in just a standard hero's journey, and
usually a lot more complex, and usually involves saying a lot more than just one thing. It's like, again, with the brevity and of these tales, it's like the Christians have with the Bible, or any religion for that matter. You can have a line in the Bible that's argued over for centuries.
Yes, and I think some of them, are just funny. Actually, some of these are I think they're just meant to be jokes. Like they're just sort of a fun joke to tell. And I think with the framework and the context of living, say, in the 1800s, 1600s, a lot of these things would be a lot funnier than they are with like the kind of TikTok brain that I have currently. But I still get a little bit of a chuckle out of some of these, and I see how like some of these points could be turned into jokes. But it is the brutality as well that I think is sort of fallen out of style in our time. It has, like Vingel mentioned, this kind of just straight to the point brutality of some of these stories, where people just get their heads chopped off or get drowned or they're smashed in or shot, and it's very nonchalant.
Yeah, just my 5 cents on the hero with 1,000 faces question, as it were. I get what you're saying, and I agree. I mean, analysis tends to get a bit forced after a while, but I think there is something to. I don't want to come across as some universalist in one sense of that word, but I think it points to a sort of an emergent, if you will, sort of property in all of humankind. But of course,
that's what I was trying to get across with the navigating by the stars. That if a lot of these civilizations and cultures come up with the same core truths, then is it our place to question that wisdom?
You get into the perennial philosophy question that we touched on last time, but also just one thing. I remember borrowing a book from Deichmanske Library in Oslo quite a few years ago now, and it was from late 1800s, I think, that edition, and I wish I could find it again. It was by Jørgen Moe, and it included and of course we'll get into Asbjørnsen and Moe, who were the folktale collectors. But Jørgen Moe wrote in that foreword or essay included in the book, he drew parallels between Nordic folktales and Indian folktales, even back then. So
interesting.
You could actually see they had a consciousness of sort of a shared Indo-European.
Maybe we have to start Hyperborea posting.
Yeah. So I mean, that's quite interesting, I think, and but that's not equally universalistic, of course, to the myths of Campbell that he gets into. But I think it has to do with actually myths traveling Uh, East of the sun and west of the moon, I almost said there, but west and east from the
Uh-huh.
Indo-European origins.
Sure. Julius Flavius in the chat expresses that these are core truths with various expressions depending on the peoples, and he says truths from where the spiritual higher sphere of existence. And I agree, this is something that in a sense transcends a single individual or a single life or quote unquote physical reality.
So it's a bit of a Platonic view, isn't it?
Yep.
So there's a few bullet points that I included here as well that I didn't know where to fit them exactly, but we are going to talk about some commonalities between these folk tales. Magic numbers, numerology is a thing that reoccurs. Like you have the magic numbers 3, 7, 9, and 12. I think 3 and 7 probably the most frequent ones.
Yeah.
But you're just going to see them over and over and over again. There's never 4 of anything or 5 of anything or 8 of anything. Yeah. If anything is numbered, it's going to be one of those.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you have anything, Miguel?
No, sorry, but I did make some notes on one tale in particular that we could, if you have the time, go through quite quickly. And you have there examples of 3 and 7 in particular. And,
did you have any notes that you sent to me, or?
No, I didn't send them to you. I just wrote
Okay.
them down like a half an hour before we went live, actually.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But maybe we should save that for after we talk about Askeladden and the trolls.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
We'll get to take it toward the end there. Repetition is also another staple of these stories, is that they have to kind of repeat the same thing. Sometimes I feel like it's just kind of to drive the points home, or it's a bit of like the sort of fun of these stories is that to have them repeated so you kind of understand it, especially in an oral tradition. I think that's quite important. For a younger audience as well. I think it's sort of it's fun for them. I'm not saying that this is just made for kids or whatever, and that's why they're repeating things. But it's something that is very common in these.
But it's
stories.
also certainly a part of it. These stories, some of them at least, are intended for children as lessons or as bedtime stories, and you can't sort of ignore that. But that's also the point, because the children are the future of of the generation and of the civilization. And if you're going to pass on knowledge, that's the way you do it, right?
Yes.
I mean, why do you think the left is so going so heavy on schools?
I think they understand something. They ditch the debate. They just go straight on the kids.
Yeah.
So timelessness is another point. Like they talk about, a law in a kingdom far, far away, a long time ago, or a galaxy far, far away. This is also a staple where these stories are usually made in such a way where they try to not make too many references to current events or anything that's happening. The problem is that the world that these tales are told is rooted in a very specific reality. So even though they don't reference specific elements, you can really tell where it comes from because of some of the things that are referenced, say like royalty being a very important thing. With the economics, for instance, I don't mean like they talk about supply chains, but there's, especially in the Norwegian folktale, a kind of understanding of poverty. I think that's very important, poverty and charity, in a sort of Christian context that I think could only exist there. Christianity, like I think this type of Norwegian 1800s, 1700s environment where a lot of people were just living on sort of subsistence level in terms of wealth, and most people were poor, especially compared to now. People were like extremely poor in terms of their material welfare, but this was kind of in my view kind of a perfect foundation for Christianity to thrive, and for these values to really shine through in the Norwegian people. And you see this with a lot of the these folk tales, where the idea of charity comes in to even though somebody who is really poor and has very little, they're still encouraged to be charitable and share like the very little things that
Yep.
they have with others, and they're being rewarded for it. And they try to drill that into the children as much as possible. Because I mean, the world we live in now, in my view, is just so changed. It's so fundamentally altered by some of the ideas from the French Revolution and the wealth and the capital that has accumulated over time. That it's say like the act today. I went to the store and there was a guy outside of the store he really looked like one of these sort of poor kind of old men from the fairy tale, and he was asking me for money basically, and of course I didn't give it to him. I never give to beggars because usually now it's going to be either tied to some type of drug habit or organized mafia rings.
Hmm.
And that's sort of the time we live in, that it's just the act of giving is just, it's completely corrupted. It's not
Yeah.
pure in the same way that it was, or you like people give to these charities, but they're just tied into these large NGO global networks where they just
The money just sort of like disappears.
the money disappears, and they just further the aims of like the gay basically.
Yeah.
So it's completely like non-local, completely corrupted. So you're not able to act out that kind of value system in this world at all. So that's when we talk about like the Christianity receding, because like the soil is just not ripe for that to
Yeah.
exist, in my view, in the era
That's
that
an
we live in.
interesting way of looking at it, but it feels very true when I hear it now. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's a
there are
very
some
accurate analysis.
there are some things there to touch on in regards to poverty. Like I notice in the folk tales that, of course, they are written from the excuse the wording, plebeian point of view. They are folk tales after all,
Uh-huh.
and they always aspire toward something higher. You could say that in a spiritual context, but also in more worldly terms. For instance, the story that I made some notes on, it's described that there are some horses that a king gives to his sons, and they're worth mange hundre daler, or many $100. I mean,
Uh-huh.
daler is an old currency.
Yes.
You could say dollars, but that's probably a completely unrealistic price for a horse back then. But it sort of made very clear all of the sort of splendor of the rich. And of course, a lot of culture comes down from above. Folk music is inspired by probably higher forms of music, and our own national costume, the bunad, is in part derived from designs that were worn in courts in Europe in the late medieval or certainly Baroque era. And also the point about giving alms, giving to poor people, is a recurring theme, often connected to the number 3, because Askeladden, who we will get into, the ash lad, he tends to meet 3 persons or three animals often,
Mm-hmm.
and he helps them out. He tends to give them his food or help them in other ways, and this will come back later in a positive way. So
It's this interesting mix of Christianity and ancient Nordic stuff where it sort of overlaps, as you said, to that where he doubles on being kind to the poor but also kind to nature at the same time, which is
I was
a bit of a different aesthetic.
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I don't know if I want to relegate giving to the poor entirely to Christianity, but that's certainly a Christian virtue. And of course, the folk tales are very much sort of, if they existed prior to Christianity, they have, of course, been amended to fit
Right.
with Christian values.
I mean,
so
at the point where we're reading them, it doesn't really, the difference is negligible, I guess is the word.
Yeah. So anyway, I was thinking the point about giving to people in need is a very Christian motif, sort of a moralizing aspect of the folk tales. And perhaps later in the quest, the hero, or yeah, you can call him the hero of the story, he might just chop some heads off, and it's quite brutal. So you see those two aspects synthesized in a in a very kind of seamless, but also from a modern point of view, kind of like shocking manner. I mean, these were tales told for children often, and they didn't mind giving the children a bit of a fright back in the day.
But Walrus, could you bring in like the Julius Flavius comment there about bringing bums into your home? Because I thought that was a bit of a. I have a bit of a tangent, just this small tangent there. I mean, you could find interviews with this guy on YouTube, not Julius, but there's a Norwegian author that's named Tor Gotaas, who writes a lot of these. He writes a lot of books about these sort of older Norwegian things, from everything to outhouses to farms. And he also has a book about Norwegian vagabonds and the Norwegian vagabond culture. I mean, for those not in the know, I mean, a vagabond is basically sort of a drifter, like a person who doesn't really have a job, or you don't have a place to live, so you can just sort of walk around from house to house, ask for food.
For the Americans in the audience, this would be sort of the Dust Bowl 1930s kind of living. Think of Mice and Men. You've probably read that if you're American, where you have drifters who go from farm to farm and live on doing sort of like manual labor during the day.
And like in this book, he explains that this was a lot more. I mean, you don't have any of that stuff now. I mean, it's almost unthinkable. But in the 1800s, I think you had almost maybe like 1,000 people who were doing this, just walking from farm to farm. You just show up there and, okay, you're just invited in. They'll let you have the food. You can sleep in the barn. There's some sort of lively community there, and you can always help them with some manual labor. It's not like this kind of difficult technical stuff that you need schooling for. You could just start participating.
I touched on it a little bit in one of the videos I did earlier, the video called Of Work and Bugmen, where this sort of modern way of thinking about work as this regimented, you give your time to an employer sort of way has destroyed any sense of that, and any sense of community building through work, or through, well, what Evola calls action, I suppose. And I don't remember, I think I was talking to a friend of mine, and I joked about, in theory, I could probably, if I wanted to, I don't have a very large property, but it's large enough that I probably could just hire a person, like, and there would be enough work to go around for like a full-time job, or at least like half a week, 50% to like 75%, say, work week. But that's just gone because everybody has to sort of like be a serf to some company now. So
yes, it's it's completely gone, and there's all this infrastructure that's put in place, but just a little bit more on the vagabond culture. There's other things that are implied in a type of culture where you could be a vagabond, and you could do this maybe into your 60s. So I guess it would be difficult when, your body starts breaking down and you have to keep on the move. But people could do this for most of their lives. They would be welcome anywhere, and you could travel safely. It's something to really think about. Like, you could walk around Norway on these kind of pathways, and it would be safe for you to do that. You wouldn't have to be worried about getting mugged or getting run over or anything like that. You could just walk around and be welcomed. And that idea is just so foreign now, I think, to anyone alive.
Not only that, I mean, you'd come to a farm who would be perfectly willing to sort of like house you. I mean, usually you would be put up in a barn or something, but they would regularly take in strangers to stay there for like a couple of days, right? And give them food and spend time with them, and they'll work for them, and this just, the trust there just worked.
Yeah, I mean, it is just the land time forgot, basically. It's like this perfect vibrant kind of community. I didn't live there, of course. I can't vouch for it actually
No, and
being that
I'm
good, but
sure, because people are going to be, every time you talk about something in a general sense on the internet, there's going to be one guy in the comments saying, well, actually, there was this one event where someone got killed, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the general idea here.
yeah.
The phrase "the past is a foreign country" springs to mind.
Yes.
I do want to add just a little tidbit, not to be the well, actually guy, because I agree with everything you just said. But it's a funny thing. I worked last summer, as a guide at an Big Dutun, which is sort of a constructed. They've moved old buildings from the valley that I live in.
Like a reconstruction of ancient townsteads, is it?
Yeah, like a 1700s, 1800s farm, pretty much.
Okay, more farms. Okay, yeah.
And the buildings there are all authentic, but they've been moved. So they're 200, 300, 400 years old. But in one building there, which was a home, there is in one corner, there's a very, very tiny bench. And that was the bench that the beggars could sit on while waiting for to be given some food or whatever. But it's clear that
Nice.
it takes up minute space. But so there was definitely a hierarchy and an acknowledgement of that, even in the design of this bench. You can sit in the corner while waiting, but everything.
But I mean, even having a bench is dedicated to this
everything you
is
said is true, and
something quite different.
And of course, that wasn't the only building. That was the home of the farmer and his wife and all his kids. And certainly they would put up vagabonds in the barn or whatever, as you said.
Yes. So I don't have anything more to add on the vagabonds, but it kind of sets the stage for the world that we're entering into with the folklore.
Yes. And I think on that note, we'll just keep going.
Yep.
Oh, right, this slide. So
the title there is wrong, by the way. East of the sun, west of the moon.
it's west of the moon.
Yeah,
it's east of the sun, west of the moon.
I didn't notice earlier, so
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, sorry about that. Now this is a tale that I actually did a recording for. If you haven't listened to that, you can go listen to it after you've listened to this episode. Or if you're listening to this after or as a VOD, I suppose, or after the stream is over, you should probably listen to the reading of East of the Sun, West of the Moon first on my channel, and then you can come back and listen to our talk about it. I also had a lot of fun doing voices and pitch shifting, and it went a bit off the rails.
It was really good. I really enjoyed the audio effects in the background and everything. Really good work.
It was fun to listen to, and it sounds like it was fun to make as well.
Yes. Maybe there's more folk tales in the future on the channel. Okay, so you have linked one of these, I suppose, the theme codes.
The ATU code there.
Yes.
So it just maps onto like this is the general archetype of this story or how it's been filed in the ATU system.
I'll just share this on the screen real quick so we can get a. Let me see here. The database. Here we go. So it's filed under the search for the lost husband, the maiden on a quest for her vanished bridegroom. Various introductions present from journey. Father promises daughter, or daughter promises herself. Jephthah's vow, attempt to evade promise. Sometimes louse fattened. Not quite sure what that means. And then it trails off. and there seems to be a lot of German versions of this. Also some English, but I haven't been into any of those. But that's certainly the core of the story.
And if you just, I mean,
Oh,
you
sorry.
don't need to go back to that, but I saw there were entries concerning the Andrew Lang works there, and just to make this a bit more pan-European, the well-known writer J.R.R. Tolkien, he grew up reading all the Andrew Lang fairy books, and they were each named for a color. So the red fairy book, the blue fairy book. But I think it's certain Tolkien had all of them, and so he read this tale. And by the way, just to be a little autistic, perhaps I have an edition of a book that lists all the books in Tolkien's library at the time of his death, and
nice.
we know for sure he could recite Old Norse poetry from heart by heart, and he also read modern Norwegian or Danish, Swedish. But there is I noticed this last time I read The Lord of the Rings, that the phrase "west of the moon, east of the sun" actually pops up in Bilbo's walking song. So this is the song that
he's referencing it.
Yeah, everyone knows this song, and there are different versions in different parts of his works. I think in The Hobbit, as well as for sure, as well as The Lord of the Rings. So I think this is in the last version. So I can just read this this part. Still around the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate, and though I oft have passed them by, a day will come at last when I shall take the hidden paths that run west of the moon, east of the sun. And I'm certain that this is a reference to the Nordic folk tale. And I believe
very much like it.
Yeah, and I believe that a day will come at last when I shall take the hidden path that run. I'm repeating it. West of the moon, east of the sun. I believe this is a reference to Bilbo eventually passing west over the sea to Valinor. But this is getting a bit Tolkien-spurgy. But
well, maybe. But I mean, for those of you who have either listened or read this folk tale, I mean, that's in a sense what the maiden does as well. She travels across the ocean to the magical land.
Indeed, and it's a sort of dare I say, metaphysical ocean in a way.
Well, of course, yes.
As is Valinor in Tolkien's conception, because at one point, of course, it is in the physical world in Arda, but at one point after the fall of Numenor, the Atlantis-like island, the Valas west of the sea, they sort of separate their realm from mortal beings, at least. So the elves can follow the straight path west, but only they or their guests like Bilbo and Frodo. But yeah. Enough about Tolkien for now. I'll probably bring him up later, maybe.
Maybe we can do a whole stream on sort of Tolkien's Nordic influences at some point. But the general points of Ludic Path, do you have anything you want to add, or should I go over the general points of this?
Yeah, I wasn't able to do a very deep analysis of this this story, unfortunately. I just some things that you note that is typical here. The numbers come back over and over again, and the repetition is here as usual. But what is a little bit unique about this is the female protagonist. It's not as usual in these tales.
It's not necessarily very common, but this is also a bit of a different. That's why I chose it as well, because it flips a bit of this journey on its head and frames it in a female sort of way instead of the heroic man, you have the heroic woman in the sense that, quote unquote, this is what you need to do if you want to be a good woman, basically.
Yes.
um,
I think that it's sort of been appropriated by a more modern feminist audience in some senses, but it's not inherently feminist in any way that I could pick up on. The whole
no, I
story
wouldn't
is
say so.
also it's also very inherently serious. There's no jokes here like you see in a lot of these
Yeah.
other folk tales where they just try to make fun of stuff, and they the animals will get back to, and a lot of the story that features talking animals are just joke stories usually, but this is a very serious tale.
Yes. Now,
Just on that point, there was actually someone left a comment under your video.
uh-huh.
The reading monothalamus.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you wouldn't mind me reading out part of it. He finds it interesting that so many stories revolve around, "Hey woman, don't do X, Y, Z," and there
I
is
remember that comment.
yeah, and that made me think about kärringa mot strömmen, or I guess you could say the wife against the stream,
Uh-huh.
which is a very short Norwegian folk tale, and in it, the wife of the man sort of speaks against, or she says basically the opposite of whatever he says, and he ends up drowning her in a stream. And
Right.
so you see the brutality there. It's quite matter of fact. And he sort of he goes home, but then he thinks I better give her a burial. But he seeks for her downstream, but she's not there, so he has to go upstream. So even after death, she does the opposite of the most logical thing. Like, she doesn't float downstream, she goes upstream. So.
But yeah, this is something I thought I'd talk about later as a kind of joke, because for me that's one of the funniest stories. Even though like it has the brutality, I could see that being the punchline of that story could just be used today, and I would just if I was caught off guard, I would just be laughing loudly at it. Because it's, I mean, you have like the sort of like the idea of being contrarian. You know, it's quite popular in these circles. The contrarian wife, who sort of whatever you say, she just insists on saying the exact opposite, and that's kind of the gist of the story, is that you're so contrarian that after you've drowned in the river, you basically start floating upstream. That's kind of the punchline. But I think it's a pretty good good way of putting it with some people.
Just a short comment as well, not on that really, but we have this thing, as you know, in Norway called Eventyrsjokolade, which is a small bar of chocolate with a sort of fairy tale castle on it. And in the wrapping, there is always a folk tale. And even that folk tale I've seen inside the wrappers of. I mean, these are aimed for children, and still they have this. So I think that's kind of a white pill. if you see what I mean, like everything is so cleansed of brutality now, and I'm not saying we should, tell children the most brutal things imaginable, but there is something to be said for letting the children in of sort of the darker aspects of life and death.
Name of the contrarian story is Kärringa mot strömmen. It's basically like the hag against the current, or the wife against the current.
If you search for the woman floating upstream as well, you might find it online in English, or just the wife against the stream.
I'm writing the Norwegian title in the chat, so
I think you should find it if you look at the chat. You just copy that and put English behind it in a search engine of your choice. But to get back to the East of the Sun, West of the Moon story. This story talks about a woman who accepts a marriage to a magical bear, a white bear, that echoes a lot of other stories where sort of the woman marries or lives with a beast. But it is also one, as one of the Thalmos pointed out in the comments of the reading, that the woman ends up messing it up as well. And I think that sort of dovetails on what we talked about just now with sort of the archetypal female energy being sort of the chaotic energy and the energy that sort of upsets the status quo very often. Only that this time this leads her to lose her husband in the form of the white bear, who is also by night a beautiful prince. It should be noted that the person who instigates this downfall is the maiden's mother, which is, I think, a bit of a funny twist by the whoever the author or the authors of this, about the havoc that mothers can wreak upon a marriage, either on purpose or not. But that being said, she then decides to go on this epic quest to sort of regain her lost husband, which is the core of the story. And instead of a man in this story, and the male version of this journey would be the man facing a set of trials over time. The man would probably face either monsters or other trials, whether physical or supernatural, or trials of wit, etc. But instead, the woman more or less goes on a journey to become the wife that's gonna marry or remarry, I suppose, the prince or the bear. And she gets a bunch of gifts from hags that she meets on the way. And the hag, I think, in the folktales and in the archetypal sense, is it's not necessarily the hag as in someone evil. It's more the crone. It's the woman's role at the end of her life when she becomes a grandmother, etc., where her job is to sort of to guide the younger generation of women. And that's why everything she gets, well, apart from the apple, but I'm sure someone in the comments can tell me what the significance of the apple is. I haven't had time to do the research on it, but everything else she gets is womanly, quote unquote, tools. It's the spinning wheel she gets is the tool used for making yarn. The comb she gets is for brushing her hair. Vingel, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say this might be far-fetched, but in terms of apples and femininity, of course, in the Old Norse pantheon, you have Idun's
Yes.
Idun's apples.
That's
So at
true.
least in the Nordic context, it is
That's fertility,
actually,
is it?
I'm not actually sure now what she represents, but I believe you're right. And
yeah, she's love and fertility, I think.
and I
youth.
believe, yeah, I do believe there's actually golden apples specifically.
Okay.
Even,
Well, that's the connection
to
then.
Idun, the Old Norse goddess. Excuse me.
Leo corrected me. Yes, I changed to the word crone. Crone is correct. Hag is too evil. But the translation I was reading from uses hag, which I think is wrong. But so be it. So instead of facing trials, she sort of collects virtues, in a sense. She collects the tools of wifehood. She collects the essence of youth and fertility. And then she has to sort of like regain her her purity after having sort of lusted for the prince too early. Um, and that's quite interesting because if we think about it today, the roles would very much be flipped, where it's the man who's lusting for the woman, but in this one, she actually messes up because she's lusting for the man. And you said something about the of her traveling across the ocean, Vingo. Did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Not really. Just an observation that, of course, it didn't seem like a terrestrial ocean in a way. It seemed more of
Right.
a travel to a metaphysical realm, another realm.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to add, though, by the way, just because I mentioned Idun and her apples, of course, I should remember this, but those are the apples of youth.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well, then
That,
we're right
yeah,
on the money then, I suppose.
yeah, that the gods ate to remain youthful.
Mhm. So, but these are also things she has to give up when she arrives at the castle east of the sun, west of the moon, which I also repeat like 7 times or something, and the hag thing is 3 times, so that's the magical numbers, and each of the winds she meets is well, that's 4 actually, but there's a lot of repetition in the dialogue between the winds. So there's your repetitions, there's your magical numbers. But as I was saying, when she then arrives at the castle east of the sun and west of the moon, she has to give all of this up in order to actually obtain her husband. So she has to be willing to put her youth and fertility and sort of her hard work and sacrifice in terms of her tools on the line if she wants to acquire the husband. That's part of the deal. And her reward in doing all this, I think, is the purity that she displays when she washes the shirt, because none of the hags, and in this context it's the hags or sometimes trolls. It gets a bit confusing in the translation, but that's because the source material is is so scattered, really, because it's a folk tale. But when she then washes his shirt, it goes from black to white because all the hags were not pure of heart, etc. So when they try to wash it, it just gets worse. That's at least my interpretation of it.
That's the best one I've heard so far. You should write the Wikipedia article or update
I haven't
it
read the
because
Wikipedia article. Is it paused?
No, it's actually quite short. It just
okay.
references
Just
the stuff that I referenced here. It's just okay. It's in this category, and there's not a lot of analysis. So I don't think anybody would object,
Right.
or at least I think there's too few people paying attention to it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's at least my interpretation of sort of the archetypal actions in the story. That might not be true, or it might be true, but that's the way I read it. And then, of course, there's the moment to moment in the story with the repetitions, with the way things happen in the story. But I think the point of it is to be like a female hero's journey, in the sense that this is what you must do to become a good wife to a prince.
And this is very much a hero's journey as well. It's not just shoehorning it in. It maps really nicely onto this cycle.
Yes. One thing I noted is that when she gets when she leaves home with the white bear, the bear asks her if she's afraid, and she says no. And then once again, when the north wind is carrying her across the ocean, he asks her if she is afraid, and she says no. And to me, the way I read it, at least, that's 2 very different no's. The first one is sort of the no of, I guess, innocence, or the youth of it, in that you're not afraid just because you feel you're sort of invincible, and because you're going on an adventure. And the second no, when she's being blown across the ocean, is sort of a no of determination. It's obvious that she's in danger, but she's pushing on regardless. But I think that's all of my analysis on this one.
Yep.
Yeah,
We got
I
a lot
don't
of.
really have anything to add.
I'm just going to go to the next slide. And again, if you want to listen to me do voices, just go to my channel and look for the video. Okay, how about you talk a bit about Asbjørnsen and Mo, and I will go get some water.
Okay, I can just give a sort of quick overview of them, and maybe Vingo can fill in some details. So these two basically met, as far as I understand, in school, in elementary school. They knew each other for a long time. They went around Norway to sort of collect and solidify like a collection of folk tales. So they released them then as a sort of collection of booklets and books in the mid 1800s. Peter C. Asbjørnsen, he went on to like spend the rest of his life basically collecting and writing these tales, whereas Jørgen Moe went on to become a priest. As far as like the sort of details, Vingel, do you have any kind of juicy, interesting details about these two?
Well, I don't have too much, but I think it maybe underlined how much they actually traveled around on foot. Of course, Norway is a very the landscape isn't actually designed for walking very far, but they did a lot of work. And yeah, I have read some details, but I don't think I should bring it in. But I think it's good to sort of flesh out who they were, because Jørgen Moe was, as you said, a priest or a bishop, and he was also a poet. And it's not necessary to plug my own stuff, but it's not released yet. But I've done poetry and an anthology, and Jørgen Moe was a very important and good poet. Peter Kristen Asbjørnsen was also a natural scientist, and it's kind of cool that he, from a boat on Hardangerfjorden in the west of Norway, he found a new species, for example, of I can't recall the name now, starfish or whatever, at 400 meters depth. So using a contraption that he invented himself, found a new family of I don't know if starfish is the right word, really, but just to point out that these were sort of Renaissance men. They didn't only have one focus. And then I stumbled upon a claim that the Brothers Grimm actually defined Moe and Asbjørnsen's work as a collection of the best folk tales that exist. So I guess Asbjørnsen and Moe were pretty excited when they heard that appraisal of their work, because of course they were inspired by the Brothers Grimm and their work a few decades earlier, 2, 3, 4 decades earlier.
And I will say that it's probably thanks to them that we have such a large and robust collection of folk tales
Absolutely.
today.
I do believe they contributed to forming the Norwegian language as well, formalizing it.
Yes.
So it's interesting then to see, like Vingel talked about, that they were sort of Renaissance men, or at least at this period in history. It's a lot easier to kind of be an academic where you could be multidisciplinary in a way that you just can't anymore. You're just sort of
I miss the or sort of the ability to be multifaceted in your academic or your studies.
Yeah, it's okay to point out that Asbjørnsen, he would be termed a zoologist probably now, but that field wasn't yet in existence actually. And by the way, Jørgen Moe's son, Moltke Moe, he was the first ever professor in folkloristics in the Nordic countries.
Ah. Nice.
And he has a lot of worthwhile stuff. I've been thinking about reading one of his essays actually on nation and culture in Norwegian, probably. But yeah, anyway.
I just also like to note with Asbjørnsen here that he has like this sort of classic neck beard that was fashionable at the time. You see that with Henrik Ibsen as well. It's like one of the most famous Norwegian authors. I don't know. I don't think much of it. I mean, if I saw someone like that today, I'd probably just be laughing. But it looks kind of classical in this style. There was a lot of people who sported that type of beard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have the same connotations back then, probably.
They try to make it like a lion's mane or something. That's what I think of when I see it.
I don't know. Does telling girls that you're wandering around collecting folktales, does that work? Is it gonna? Does it work on Tinder, or are you gonna get called an incel?
It should work in my view, but I don't know. I'm not one of the ladies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But yes, they're very important in the sense that without them, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion, at least not to such a detail that we're able to.
No, so they're quite foundational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
let's
we can
get into
move
some
on.
of the archetypes. Yeah. There's the Cinder Lad, the Ash Lad, sometimes referenced as the Aspen Clog, I've seen in the international writings.
So Aspen, I guess that's the like Espen Askeladd or something.
Well, maybe, but I think it's also referring to like the boots he has been described as wearing, which are sometimes these wood sort of almost like what's they call? They wear those in the Netherlands, the wooden clogs.
Clogs.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I've just seen him referred to as that. I'm not sure if any sort of Norwegian source would call him that, but just in case someone's Googling around, they might find that too.
Yeah, I know that in one of the earliest versions of the collection, he was called Askepott, I think. And I see you have male Cinderella here.
Male Cinderella, yeah.
So, of course, as you guys know, Askepott is Cinderella in Norwegian. Mm-hmm. So that sounds very strange now, but Askeladden is much better.
So the picture here, like Nordanon says, it's from like Ivo Caprino's films. It's one of his sort of specially crafted dolls. There are sort of puppets that are controlled by this very kind of intricate system to make it move. They could move the eyes, move the arms, and make them walk around. I mean, I don't know if we're going to watch any of these clips. They're quite copyrighted, so I think we should avoid it.
I'm not sure if I dare, because I looked into it and you usually get struck quite quickly. But I was trying to see if I could find an image of him like working these dolls, because it's very cool to see. But just keep talking. I'll see if I can.
But yeah, there are different sort of renditions of this character in art. So I mean, he is the one that has to come first. Basically, as like the main kind of protagonist. He's the most recurring protagonist in a lot of these Norwegian folk stories. He's one of three brothers, and that's where the Cinderella part comes in. He mirrors Cinderella in the way that she has two older sisters that are basically always cruel and try to underestimate or put her down. So it's very similar with the Cinder Lad. He has two older brothers, Peter and Paul, named after these saints who are basically, you know, bigger in stature, stronger, basically pegged out to be more successful in life. But that's the
he has two absolute chads as brothers, basically.
So it's not it's difficult to be the Cinder Lad. The name comes from him. Basically, he's just sitting by the fire. Like, that's sort of pre-internet entertainment, pre kind of internet incel culture. He was like the the stove internet, what you'd call like the
he
fireplace
he has
culture.
the same job as Cinderella. His job is to keep the fire lit. That's it. So,
Yes.
because according to his dad, he can't be used for anything else. So,
No, he's just kind of zoning out, and he's in his own head and is not really present. So his
Yep.
let's just say that his gifts are not very apparent, but that's usually the kind of the theme of these stories, is to highlight the people who's like the runt of the litter, basically the kind of the person you don't notice as much, who has a lot of qualities that aren't so easily spotted. And things like out of the box thinking that's on the bullet point there.
hmm
This is how a lot of these stories end up being, that they run into some problem that his older brothers are not able to solve by just
it's
taking
usually
the straightforward.
I would almost say cunning is the word to use for him at times.
Yes, yeah, he has a lot of cunning. I don't even know where it comes from, if he just sits by the fire all day. But yeah, he has a lot of ideas. He's really creative and high
He's a
openness.
dreamer. That's why.
What you call sort of by the ocean personality is a very high openness. Kindness and charity is important for him as well, where he is usually willing to give money, give food to like the crone. He gives food to the old man. He'll find a lot of these people, these sort of freaks and weird people, that he will give time to, listen to, bring along with him on his adventures, and that ends up benefiting him later because he finds some use for them. Courage as well, where he's willing to kind of try his will, or sort of try to solve these problems that are seen as unsolvable, or where you have like these people who are seemingly a lot more suited to solve the problems, but he's never discouraged by any of it. And like these are sort of like they're trying to. I think it's a very good story for children to hear, where you try to sort of encourage the less remarkable child to sort of think in a different way, or try to center their talents or their, let's say, the focus into something else than trying to compete with somebody who is obviously physically stronger and bigger than you are.
But it's worth noting that he's never jealous of his brothers either for being stronger than him. He sort of just goes his own way. So it's not like, oh, I'm never going to be as strong as them. There's nothing like that. It's just he's just willing to try things differently.
Yes,
play to his own strengths.
Yeah, he has no cruelty in them whatsoever. It's usually the other characters that are cruel to the Cinder lad. Mm-hmm. The significance that he has, not just as the underdog, but I wrote Norwegian David there because you see it in a lot of just reading Norwegian newspapers. Like you're going to see they talk about the Ashlad, Askeladden. I mean, lately they've talked about Zelensky, he's like the Cinder lad, and Vladimir Putin is the troll. That's kind of the metaphor that they're using to explain like the Ukraine-Russia situation. So mm-hmm. There you see sort of how deeply that goes. There's a startup incubator in Oslo that's called Askeladden. It's called mm-hmm. like the Cinder Lads, and they name themselves that because they try to give money to these startup companies that kind of have the out-of-the-box thinking and courage. That's it's very embedded in the culture. Not just in terms of reading the stories, but the archetype of like the David Goliath character. Do you have anything to add on Askeladden, Vingel, that I missed?
No, not really. I don't think you missed much. I mean, I probably, how do you say, associated myself with him as a character. I had 3 brothers, older brothers growing up, and yeah, it's good to see the underdog sort of getting the upper hand. Not the upper hand with the brothers necessarily, but of course I'm thinking about the gutten som kappet med trollet, the boy
yes.
who had an eating competition basically with the troll, and well. Maybe I shouldn't start telling the story, but it's very deeply ingrained in me. And like his 2 brothers fail chopping wood mm-hmm. in the forest. that their father owns, because of course there is a tree that also has a stake on the forest, but Askeladden uses his wits to, in the end, defeat the troll, while his brothers ran scared back home.
Johannes Palaiologos in the chat says that there's a very gory ending for the troll. That's one of those old Nordic violence endings that
directed by Eli Roth.
Right. For posterity's sake, I will note that Mongolian Doggerland, or Three Billy Goats Bruv, as he's called himself, almost earns a ban for calling him a MGTOW. So just watch it.
He's the Sigma male, right?
Did you read Mongolian's message? Because I can't see it. Oh, Askeladden.
I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the story of the boy who tried to out-eat the troll is very. It does start the Cinder lad, and one thing I liked about the story, and I'll get back to it when we start discussing the meaning of trolls here, is that the whole premise of the story is that their father has gotten into debt, and he is able to then make the troll commit seppuku basically at the end of the story, and he takes all of the troll has a war chest or some treasure chest with gold and silver, and the story ends with, well, they were able to pay off some of the debt. Some of the debts. It's not just they weren't rich.
Yeah.
They weren't gonna be rich for the rest of their lives, and happy ever after. It's okay, we Mr. Goldstein, we got about 40% of the 40% of the debt.
But that's also one of the things that we sort of touched on with these stories, with their sort of they've got a bit of a wink and a nod. Usually, when I read the East of the Sun, West of the Moon, for example, when the trolls they burst at the end of because they become so mad, they burst at the end of the story. The narrator voice there literally says, well, I don't know what happened, but I haven't heard of them. It's this sort of very folk-like way of telling these stories. And as you said, I think that's one of those effects where it's we were able to pay off some of the debt, because it's sort of a wink and a nod to everybody hates debt, right? So...
Yes, and the kind of adult life where the problems are just kind of never solved. We just go back to just keep paying it off.
The story having a Jerry Seinfeld moment.
Right. I have nothing to add. I think we could go on to the next slide.
Yep.
So here we're getting into the royalty. That's this regular staple in some of these stories. Sometimes their royalty is just kind of mentioned, where they work as a bit more of a grounding element. Other times you have with some of these Cinder lad stories with the king and princess duo. Mm-hmm. And the standard, it seems to be this very recurring thing that the king wants to solve some problem. He just wants something, and he always just, okay, whoever can do this, you're just going to get half the kingdom and my daughter's hand in marriage. So it is a little bit of this kind of Disney characteristic thing here, where you have the father who's almost a bit of a bumbling moron, and the princess who is sort of coy and a bit difficult.
Yeah.
So you see it in with the Ash lad has a lot of these storylines, and it always goes back to the same storyline of him being able to. He basically becomes the new prince then, or sort of the new king of the realm, just because he was able to outwit some riddles or something.
I'm not sure quite what it is. It might be some cross pollination with some English stuff, where you end up with some sort of sword in the stone stuff, where you end up whoever can do this thing should be crowned king sort of effect. I don't know if that's the origin of it or what.
Yeah, I'm really not that sure. The king also appears in some other stories, like Mumle Gåsegg, the Bumble Goose Egg. I don't know if this is it seems like this very quirky, strange story that I try to read out, that's basically about a man who was born out of an egg, where they have 5 infertile women who they can't find any they can't get themselves fertilized, so they end up just finding an egg lying out in the field somewhere, and they end up just laying on top of the egg until it hatches, and a man is just born out of it. And this man is sort of an unstoppable fighting, eating, killing machine who will just work for 10 men and eat for 10 men. So he works at the local farm, and he just eats too much food, even though like he's just chopped down the whole woods. So they don't have enough to feed him. So he has to go on to, the kind of jarl or the work for the priest, and then the priest can't feed him anymore. So he has to go work for the king, and the king sends him basically to hell to fight the devil, and then he comes back. Because the king assumed he was going to fail.
I think it's the closest thing that we have to like a Hercules character, where it's like, well, hopefully you just go die to some random monster, and then he fucking doesn't, and it's just a beast.
Kicks the king into orbit, basically. That's kind of the end of the story, and that's kind of it. Like, there's no moral to it. It's just the One Punch Man story, basically.
Here's
super
a story
easy.
about an absolute Chad.
Yep.
I've never actually considered this before, but isn't it a bit subversive or whatever that he would split the kingdom in half? I mean,
maybe. But I think it might also be the king usually is an allegory for a father figure. Yeah. And offering half his kingdom is part of the son sort of supplanting the father. Or the prince, I suppose.
I don't have any deep analysis, of course, on this, but of course it's also true that you mentioned the father figure, and of course in the old days they would often split the farm up.
Yes,
that the son would have his own part of the farm to raise his own family. So it makes sense in the sort of as above, so below. View.
I think about this a bit more, like you said, Vingle, that these are folk tales, that these are like plebeian, like not to be mean, but kind of like slave morality ideas about royalty, where they sort of they do have thoughts about the king. They know who the king is, and they think about, okay, what would be the perfect situation? The best I could do in life is just to get half the kingdom and marry the princess. And the king is usually presented as just kind of disagreeable, stupid, and difficult. And you see that with a lot of like these higher up characters in the stories. If it's like they'll have the priest character, the sheriff character, it is a little bit subversive. They're not like positively presented. It's not like they love the hierarchy. Basically, they're a little bit. There's a little bit of resentment towards these characters. At least that's at least my reading of these stories.
I guess there may be an analogy there to the stepmother. I mean, he would be not the stepfather, but the father-in-law. And
Maybe.
What else was I thinking? Can't recall.
All right, do we want to move on? I think this is more just something that pops up quite often in these stories.
Yeah.
Troll time.
I mean, this is it is almost a mistake, because Shrek is just in this archetype, but the troll is very much a sort of staple of the Norwegian kind of culture. The Kittelsen pictures have him in them. I mean, my take on the troll is that they represent the sort of these kind of uncivilized, unchristian, these kind of more mean people in these stories. Where if you go back to the Cinderella story, where he's trying to have an eating competition with the troll, I mean, the premise of the story is that Cinderella's father has gotten the deed to like a large forest area that he, as a civilized man, he basically has the papers to prove that he owns it. But the troll is just basically there. The troll just lives there, and he doesn't give a damn about the deed or anything. He's just, like GTFO, I'm not, I'll basically eat you if you try to move in here. And that's what I think like these characters tend to represent, is that they just take up space, and they're not interested in following any kind of civilized norm or so engaged with that. They're just like these sort of ungroomed, uncultured people who will not hesitate to resort to cannibalism, barbaric attacks, and so on. I don't know if any of you have a different take on.
I have
troll.
certainly a similar take. I mean, I agree. I think they represent. They are both a force of nature, in a way, and they also what's it called? Embody the pre-Christian folk spirit. I would say the old nature religions, Old Norse religion, in that it's a recurring theme in many tales, including the one pictured here in the Caprino rendition, that the trolls will say, "Jeg lukter kristenmanns blod." I smell the blood of a Christian man.
That's interesting because in the English have the "I smell the blood of an Englishman" is usually what the trolls say. But in Norwegian, it's specifically a Christian.
Yeah, it's like the civilized and or Christian man sort of trespassing on the maybe I shouldn't say heathenish forests, but there's certainly
pagans are getting BTFO'd on this stream apparently.
And there's it's a very primordial. I don't know. I mean, Norway is covered with the mountains and forests, and it's very close to our collective consciousness. We do a lot of skiing and hiking in the forest, and
if anyone, I mean, any Norwegian who's been out in the forest at night will understand that we believe in trolls, to put it that way. So
yeah. And this is
easy
also
to see why that can be conjured up.
Yeah, and you can see it later in the Kittelsen illustrations that the trolls are basically a part of the landscape itself. They rise up like mountains or like bergs, or
they have a connection to the earth and the rocks, and
indeed they have trees growing from their heads and necks and so on.
Yes, it's a very kind of plant-like, uncivilized archetype, and the eating children seems to recur in a lot of these stories about the trolls.
Yeah.
Also, them not being very intelligent seems to be like a common thing, where they're extremely powerful, but they're not very quick-witted. So the protagonist always has to find some way to outsmart them.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to add on them other than that.
Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to say about the trolls. I mean, these are, when we're going through this, it's mostly if people end up reading these, or if I do any more readings in the future, if there's mentions of trolls, you at least will have some context of what that might mean. Apparently the troll slide has gotten the chat more lively. So that's a bonus. All right. Animals. I think animals here, there is some cross-pollination with animal fables. A lot of the archetypes seem to be similar, if not the same.
Yes, I mean, I found this picture because it has like the three most recurring animals, at least from what I've read in these Norwegian folktales. I mean, the polar bear in the east of the sun, west of the moon is a lot more sophisticated than these animals. I mean, you have the fox here, Mikkel Rev, who's really like this type of joker character in these stories, where he always just creates trouble. He's ahead of everybody else. He's a lot smarter than the bear and the pig, and he just creates problems for them. Where they have these types of stories that are featuring the fox and the bear that are more of these comedy stories, not as much about trying to learn a lesson or having some kind of archetypal morality tale. But like with the fox and the bear, they'll have a story where they try to explain why the bear has a short tail, and the reasoning for that is that the fox basically tricked him into thinking that he could do ice fishing with his tail, and the longer he keeps the tail in there, then the more fish he will catch. So it just results in him freezing his tail over and tearing it off his body. I mean, there's a story where the bear has like a storage room full of butter, and the fox eats all of it, and he manages to trick the bear into thinking that it was the bear who ate it. I mean, it just goes on and on. That it just keeps pulling tricks on the poor bear here. So the pig is not as frequent. I have a few, like I'll get back to like the pig and the pancake story, but there's a story about the pig just also getting tricked by the fox. So he's not that smart. He has there's a story about the pig where he tries to become a man basically, and he wants to sleep in a bed and he wants to eat grains, but the fox is basically able to subvert him into just going back to rolling in shit basically. So I don't know if any of you have any insights on the animals.
Well, we can just underline, I think the fox in particular, maybe all of these, the fox is very perennially the same archetype, I believe, in all European folklore, basically. I mean, you have sly as a fox is an expression, I believe, Slu som en rev. You have characters like Reynard in France. It's just the same type of character. So, yeah, I believe everyone can relate to that.
It is one of Machiavelli's the sort of political styles of either the fox or the lion, basically, and you can sort of see why here. The character traits of the sort of political fox is on full display here. It's just like constant subversion 24/7 with this character. He never does anything else. And I think there's one of these adventures about the farmer who has like a horse and carriage, where the bear basically he's able to steal the horse and the carriage to try to actually become like a horse rider, and he just rides past a lot of people. He rides past like a woman and a man and the fox, and he ends up not being able to do or say very much. He crashes, and the bear just sort of dies by hitting his head on the rock. But then the farmer has to just go back to find where the horse and the carriage went. So he has to pass the same people. And he talks to the fox at last, where the fox tries to convince him that, well, you should let me ride the horse and carriage because I'm an excellent rider. And so the farmer gets back to him later and he just shoots him in the face. Like that is sort of the story. It's just one line where it's like, I knew the fox was up to no good. It's like, why don't you come on the carriage? And he just blasts him with a rifle, because it was just, there was just no way that anything good could come out of the anything that the fox was up to.
Based farmer, then, I guess. Do not negotiate with foxes.
But we'll get into the pig as well, because the pig can be a little bit subversive, like with the story with the pig and the pancake. So I have sort of slide on it later, so we could get back to it then.
We'll do that.
Let's see. Here's some other recurring characters. I added a few, like in the last minute here. So we have the hag, which we should have renamed the the crone. I guess that's sort of the same.
It's either or. It's used both as the hag and as the crone, but yeah.
The crone, that's recurring. Like we have either the kind of wise old woman, the disagreeable old woman that wants to that tries to help the young woman or the young child further the adventure, or you have like the story here with the hag with the comically large nose that's gotten stuck between sort of the in the tree here, where she's more of a comic foil for the rest of the story, like the hag against the current.
Yep.
Yeah, she hasn't had a bite to eat in 100 years, I seem to recall. In the folktale pictured.
So on the right here, then we have the devil, who actually makes some appearances. I mean, usually you could have other antagonists, like, the king could be there, or the troll could show up, but the devil actually shows up in a few Norwegian stories as a sort of endpoint. Gamle Erik is the nickname that he has, which is like Old Eric, and I really don't know where that comes from, but he is more like this kind of Faustian it's not like a very large gothic type of devil. It's more of like it's just understood that he is like the kind of like peak bad guy in from this Christian worldview.
Mm-hmm.
The deacon here, the priest, appears sometimes as a protagonist, sometimes as a side character. Not always portrayed positively. Sometimes as being a bit of a butt of the joke. I suspect that is kind of like from the view of the people who are like kind of at the bottom. If you are a bit of a serf or something in the Norwegian community, you're probably going to have some degree of resentment for the priests because they had a very like strong role in these communities. They would be like, sort of like the top of like short of the king, of course. The sheriff as well, a bit of a similar character who's not portrayed very positively. The picture I used here is from Ivo Caprino's Vesle Frikk med Fela. That's like Frick the Fiddler. It's a very interesting adventure about a young boy who's sort of sent off by his parents because they can't feed him, they can't clothe him, they just have like no money. So he's sent off to be a serf on a farm where he works for like doing manual labor for the sheriff for 3 years, and he decides to leave.
By the way, which wasn't very uncommon back in the day.
No. So
There's
after
a long history
leaving,
of children sort of being sent out, like you gotta go like wander through the forest for like 2 weeks to get to another farm where you're gonna work for like 2 years because we can't feed you.
People were a little bit tougher back then, I think.
Yeah.
There is, by the way, I was chatting with Mongolian yesterday, and he brought it up actually. Vesle Frikk med Fela is cognate in the Arne Thompson index with a German folktale called The Jay in the Bush, basically. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. You see like the German and Netherlands, the folktales from there. It's like they have a lot of jays, stories about jays.
Yeah, we didn't have so many of them because they were banned according to the
the Constitution. The Constitution bans them, and I actually consider that like being one of the. I have like two episodes in mind for the Longhouse that are both. We might have to put them on Odyssey because one is going to be about this sort of occult child abuse ring, so the other one's going to have to be about the laws in the Constitution, like the Norwegian laws against Jays and Jesuits.
Stuff.
Yeah, try to look at. I think that I don't know how YouTube would react to it if we just did it as a matter of fact stream, just about the law, how that law changed over time, and like the arguments for and against, and who were sort of the big drivers and the consequences it had for society. But I don't want to get totally off track here. The story about Frick the Fiddler, he is basically 3 years of hard labor at the farm of the sheriff, constant abuse, and he then leaves because he's just salaried with food. He doesn't even get new clothing, so his clothes are just torn into rags, and he wants to just asks if he could get a salary for 3 years, and he gets 3 shillings, which it's not a lot. That's what I understand. I don't have a currency calculator to check the inflation on that, but like this is where you get into like the Christian values and the charity, because he walks away after 3 hard years of labor with 3 shillings, almost no money, and he ends up giving the shillings away to beggars because he's just met by these older beggars who complain that they I got it worse than you, basically, so you should give me the money, and he does. And he's then rewarded with like this magic fiddle that he uses to get up to all kinds of hijinks later and kind of make a fool out of the sheriff and a lot of these authoritarian, more sort of higher up characters in the town. I think that's kind of a fantasy, probably. It's like a maybe even more than the marrying the king's daughter for the sort of serf class in Norway.
Yeah, maybe.
So we have the farmer here. I mean, that is it's really more of a protagonist. When you don't have the Cinder lad, you're going to have usually some kind of male character, and it's going to be a farmer. So I don't have him higher up there, but he is sort of a permanent fixture. I mean, Norway for most of its history was just an agricultural society, so this would have been the everyman character.
Yeah.
And you have let's see, the last one here is like the old man. I don't know if there's like he has some similar word for it, like a crone or a hag, the male version, but this is like the seventh father of the house, as Vingel says. It's also another animated Ivo Caprino story where the number 7 recurs, and the whole story is just about a man who has been walking for a while, and he just requires shelter for the night. So he goes up to ask the man outside the house, and he'll just defer responsibility. He's sort of a young guy, and it says, "Well, you got to ask my father because he's the owner." And then, he talks to the father, that's like the blacksmith, and says, "Well, you got to talk to my father. He's in the other room." And there's an even older man, and they just sort of keep going.
Keeps
like
going
that
up
for,
fathers. Yeah.
7 generations of fathers until he meets the oldest, like the grandfather, who is basically like this kind of complete shrunken in little squeaky, wrinkly man who sits in a horn on the wall. Who is then able to just nod and give him permission to stay over. So
just to point out, sorry if you weren't finished.
No problem. I think I was done.
Yeah. With the image of the farmer there, I believe that's supposed to be Askeladden. You took it from the same picture as the hag, right?
Oh, busted. Damn.
Yeah.
I was trying to subvert these people. I couldn't even find a good farmer picture, but yeah.
No,
let's just pretend there's a farmer.
Let's say he's a future farmer. But it's kind of funny, that picture, because the ash lad is laughing at the crone figure there.
Yeah.
Stuck in the tree stump with their nose.
That's also something we didn't mention, but that's something that about the Ashlad too. He usually has quite a bit of humor in him. But yeah, the old man story you talked about, Ludwig, I think that's a bit of, I'm not sure, but I'm getting some great chain of being feels from that story. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know.
At least in the Ivo Caprino video, I saw it more as like a comedy tale of
that telling of it is certainly a comedy version.
Yeah,
it gets into the ridiculous, right?
I always laugh out loud at like the third or fourth father, and it's like incredulous, like, your father? Like, this is an endless line of fathers in this house.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because he starts getting tired of being like directed to an older guy every time after like the third one, and he's got quite a few left.
Yeah. But I guess we can take the next. Okay.
The Pig and the Pancake.
Yes, this is an interesting one, actually. I mean, it features the pig as more of a standalone character. No, it's not really about the pig, but it's about the anthropomorphic pancake. This is a very like a fun children's story. Most of it just doesn't have any kind of archetypal significance. The rough shot of the story is basically you have a mother with 7 children. The children are hungry, of course, as everybody was back then. The pancake is then achieves some kind of sentience and starts to roll away, and they beg, basically. It's like, "Oh, kind pancake, please, 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 please get in my mouth. I want to eat." And so, but the pancake just refuses. He's not having any of it, so he'll just keep rolling away from these people. He meets new people on the way, and they beg and they groan and try to just be able to eat the pancake, but he's not interested in eating them or letting them eat him. And see, the exception here is when he meets the pig, who the pig is then initially not interested in eating the pancake. He just says, "Well, it's dangerous to go alone, my friend. Hello, my friend Pancake. It's dangerous to go alone in the woods. Maybe you need some companionship." And so they start traveling together, and then they get to the riverbank, basically. And the pig says, "Well, it's dangerous for for a pancake to swim. So why don't you get on my snout and I'll take you over to the other side. And when they reach basically the middle of the river, the pig just opens its mouth and swallows them. And it's just, for kids, it's just a funny story. But the reason that I liked it is that it sort of parallels the frog and the scorpion story. If you are familiar with it, where it's really like with the frog and the scorpion, you have basically the frog and the scorpion standing on the riverbank, and the scorpion asks if he could take a ride on the back of the frog over to the other side, and the frog says, well, but you're a scorpion, you're just going to sting me when I'm halfway across, so I won't do it. And then the scorpion says, well, if I sting you, then we'll both die, so it wouldn't make sense for me to do it. And when they get halfway across, the frog, after agreeing to it, the scorpion just stings the frog and they both drown. And it's like the point of the story is basically that the scorpion's going to scorp. Like there's no point
the pig for being a pig.
Yeah. There's no point in sort of trying to impose this kind of rational framework. And I think that's very important in our sphere, and the kind of wisdom that we try to find, that there's no this kind of like Enlightenment rationalist view. It only goes so far. Like some people, this kind of rational worldview, the rational model actor, it just doesn't apply in certain situations. The pig is going to be a pig, the scorpion's going to be a scorpion, and well, you can infer from that what you want. But with the pig and the pancake story, the lesson is a little bit different, because it's more of a soft power kind of lesson here.
Yeah.
Everybody was just basically asking. They were just asking the pancake they're begging and trying to, please, I want this thing. But the pig was a little bit smarter in that he just tried to help. He started off by helping him, and when the pancake had become dependent on him, that's when he ate
strikes.
It. So, that's when he strikes. So this is like if you go into a store and the clerk asks you, can I help you with something? It's like they're trying to basically do something for you to make you depend on them. And when you're in that state, you're more receptive to offers of like sales and so forth. And you see it a lot in politics by the way that the American empire has been able to expand is really by this kind of soft money power. If you start with like the Marshall Plan, we're just helping you, we'll give you all this money and all this capital, and you can build yourself up, and you get access to our infrastructure and the oil and so on. And they make you dependent on them until the point where they can actually just chew you up completely and this make all the decisions for you. And I think that's kind of the core lesson of this story. That's why I thought it was funny to just have a soul slide on it. I don't know if anyone of you have a different take on it or something I missed.
I think for my case, I think you touched everything I thought about when I thought about that allegory, I suppose.
Yep. So I guess we could move on to the next slide.
Yep.
So I have another classic adventure here. It's the Three Billy Goats Gruff. And this one is kind of an open question for me, because it's a very funny story to read as a kid, and this is super popular. I've seen like they're putting out new kids books, and they use it in kids TV, and it seems like they just like the young people, they can't get enough of this story, where like you have the archetypal stuff that is reoccurring here. So you have the three brothers who try to pass the bridge here, and the troll is back, who doesn't care for public property. He just basically takes ownership of the bridge and insists on then eating the youngest. And the youngest says, well, if you're patient, then my older brother's going to come along, and you should try to eat him because he has a lot more meat on the bone. So he waits for the older brother, and then the older brother just repeats the same thing. It's the repetition pattern. Just, I've got a brother that's older than me. He's got even more meat. And then when he tries to take on like the eldest brother there, you can see he's got the fully developed horns, and is a little bit bigger and stronger. So he rams the troll right in the face, and he drowns in the river.
Mhm.
That's kind of the end of the story there. But to me, it was a little bit difficult to kind of understand if this was a morality tale, what exact morality is it trying to
I think the
teach?
morality trail here is greed, basically. Like you're not like the troll is supposed to be the lesson here, that
Yeah,
the troll is blinded by his greed for the potential goat in the future, that he fails to appreciate the goat he has right now, and so he gets
absolutely.
fooled by that.
Yeah, this is at least to me as well, was the obvious interpretation. But then there's the problem is that he could have just eaten all of them. That's what I don't,
Well, if it
my
was
sort
like
of
a real
rational
troll,
mind.
but I
Yeah,
mean, it's the story. So I mean,
uh,
the third brother is as strong as he needs to be to defeat the troll. That's the point, you
yes.
know.
I just think that I mean, yeah, the troll would have just eaten the first one and then the second one, and then he would have maybe fought the third one or something. It
Yeah,
would have been a lot more sad then. But yeah, trolls are bad, I guess. As Nordown says,
I'm sorry.
trolls.
I'm sorry. This fairy tale is too happy for you.
It's too happy for me.
It's not black
I
pilling
can't.
enough.
It's not blackpilling enough. But yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, I didn't understand the real politics here. But
I don't
it's
think
not.
there is one. Some of them
No,
are just, moral tales for children.
I think
So
it's fun for kids. Yeah, I think
now,
that's the end of these slides. If
oh,
Vingle had
sorry,
something you wanted
my
to show, we can.
headphones messed up. Hello?
Hello, I'm hearing
Oh,
you.
okay, we're back.
I
Yep,
think that's the end of the slideshow.
that's
So
the
if
end of
Vingle
the
had
slides. But
some art that we wanted to look at.
Vingo has collected art from Theodore Kittelsen that covers these topics that we have been talking about. So let me just get up my screen here. And these are beautiful paintings and slash drawings, some of them. Let me see here. Well, the first set is depictions of the Ash Lad. Please,
With the troll as well in the first one there.
can we... Hello? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Here's
So
one of the...
this is actually not a very well-known picture by Kittelsen, but it really underscores the brutality of some of these tales.
Yeah,
So it's the
here
Cinder
has
Lad.
beheaded a troll.
He's running the strength build in this one with the
Yeah, you can see that there.
Zweihander.
That
Yeah,
seems like he has taken the troll's sword.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't recall if there's a title in the file I sent you, but I guess from the motif there that this is from Soria Moria Castle.
Ah, that would make
And
sense.
of course, English speakers may know Moria from the refugee camp, or the common speech name for Casa Doom. But Soria
Yeah.
Moria is a very well-known sort of motif, fairy tale motif. And in it, the Ash Lad, he first comes to Soria Moria to, well, he ends up rescuing a princess there, and she tries to convince him that, like, no Christian man has ever set his foot here and left again. But he is intent on staying, and he drinks from the troll's draught that the troll drinks whenever he wants to go out to war. It actually says in the text.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he takes the troll sword and uses it against him. I'm actually not sure it's Soria Moria. I guess there are several versions, because in the tale I read recently, the first troll has 3 heads. The second one has 6 heads, and the last one has 9 heads. So there you see of course, the number 3 popping up all the time.
Yep,
9
and the
is,
repetition, etc.
Yeah, like the story is usually told in the same manner for every occasion. They don't abbreviate the events, so it gets repetitive. But that's part of the way the stories are set up.
Let's go to the next one. I don't like that it's When I was opening it earlier, it didn't load like this. Maybe it's because I'm sharing it. It's being weird.
I can see through the black screen that this is, there we go, this is the ship used in the Ash Lad and the Seven Helpers. That's
Yep.
7 right there. And it's a ship that can move both on land and in air and water.
Yep.
It's a dragon ship, obviously, in Kittelson's
Of course.
illustration here.
And so one of his helpers is a boatswain, isn't he? And he constructs the ship, and the other one is like he has like managed to sort of like swallow the winds or something. So he like blows. Is that, if I remember correctly, that's the
Yes, that's actually he has. It's been a long time since I've read or seen that one,
but I think that's how they fly with it.
Yeah, but he has. I may be mixing up characters, but one of them has 7 summers and 7 winters inside of him.
Oh, that might be it. Yeah.
And there's also a guy, by the way, who has 7-mile boots who can run through the air.
It's the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Pretty much,
he assembled.
Oh dear.
Now this one I like. I've seen this before, mostly because it's you talked about Tolkien earlier.
Yeah,
I feel like there's echoes.
Indeed.
So this is the Ash-Lad and the dragon.
Yeah, I don't know which tale this is supposed to depict, but it's a massive dragon. And then I think I can discern that the next one is Askeladden.
I think it's where he's poking the fire, maybe? Or is it...
Okay, maybe I was... Okay, yeah, that's just him. If you go to the next one... I mean, these are so beautiful, we could just look at them, but it's a bummer that it takes so long to load.
Is it the file size? Is that why? Okay, there we go.
Maybe. So this is very iconic. I think Larik or Walrus mentioned earlier that some elements are used in the public consciousness to this day, and you will probably see this often in caricatures and just used as is in articles and stuff to make analogies to present day events. So this is him seeing Soria Moria at a distance.
Yeah. I think the next one is, if I remember from the title, this is when he's sharing his food with a bear in the forest. Yep.
Yeah. Classic animal encounter, helping the animals out. He'll probably get something out of it later in the tale.
Yep. Come on. Okay, there we go.
So what's the text say here?
I'm not quite sure. Oh yeah, I see what it says. It's one of those nice, like, I talked about him having humor earlier.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, "You poor old hag, you're probably hungry, aren't you?"
Yeah.
He's yeah, it's the bluntness of some of these stories are quite funny sometimes. I don't quite remember what the story here is, but
me neither. Maybe he ends up helping her as he usually does.
I think he helps her and she helps him back, but I don't remember quite the... Then we have trolls. Let's do trolls.
Oh yeah, that's... I'll wait for it to come up, but this is very well known, for sure. the troll at Karl Johan. Of course, Karl Johan is the main street in Oslo. So this is, you can see the Storting, the Parliament building, at the right there.
Yep.
And the street goes all the way up to the castle, the royal castle.
So basically, the castle would be behind our point of view here.
Yeah. And then you have Grand Café at the left there.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Obviously, all the inhabitants of Oslo here are shocked at the sight of one of these primordial beings entering their
Not
realm.
the top hat guy. He seems pretty comfortable.
Exactly. I believe that's supposed to be Henrik Ibsen.
I was gonna say he looks like him.
Yeah, because Henrik Ibsen used to frequent Grand Café every day. And the way, I haven't read too much Ibsen, I read Brand, but I perceive he was in the era of literature known as realism. And he did, of course, write Per Gynt, which was based on folklore. But it was quite...
Observe the Giga Chad in the bottom right. He's not a Giga Chad, he's a man among the ruins.
Yeah.
He's unaffected by the troll walking the streets.
And I believe that's also Kittelsen's commentary on sort of Ibsen's worldliness and sort of progressive attitude. He doesn't even notice that this primordial creature has entered his presence.
Interesting. Let me see if I can, in the background, download these.
Yeah, that's just a classic troll slaying, I guess.
So can you zoom a little bit? See if
I can try. Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's much better. It goes right in the stomach. You should have seen it coming, I think.
There's a funny text to it as well, in another version I can't recall.
Let's go to the next one here. I'm just downloading them in the background because that's probably going to be faster to show it.
Yeah, it would probably be better to have them in a PDF or something, but I don't know if that's feasible now.
No, we're fine. I'm just going to...
Google realized it was being used for propaganda purposes, so they allocated less resources on the cloud.
And this is the troll that wonders about how old it is. Trollet som grunner på hvor gammelt det er. You can see here the troll really has a massive presence in the landscape. His arched back is basically like a mountain in itself. You can see all of the little trees sticking up there. It's obviously huge.
Yeah.
And he has forgotten his own age.
I think I have an alternative here. So I managed to download some of the photos. Let me just bring up the... See, remove this and stop screen share and then share screen. Yes. Okay, this should be better. This is called The Troll's Eye.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes sense.
Not disappointed.
Sorry.
I was not disappointed. It had a troll's eye in it.
Yeah. I think Kittelsen used this motif, maybe a different version, of course, inside one of the cupboard, in his house. Like he used to, but yeah, this is too much Kittelsen specific
deep lore
trivia, perhaps. But we could do one on him in the future, perhaps.
Okay, let me go to the next one. Let's see, how can we do that? Is it like this? can I do this? Okay, here we go.
Okay, that's much
Oh,
better. So this is a very
a
similar. This is the same motif, basically.
forest troll, it's called, yeah.
Mm.
But it's the same motif. You can see that. But I really like these because it gets across the whole like woodland aesthetic of the Norwegian trolls. I really like that.
Mm.
Here's a
There as
troll.
well.
Yeah.
Oppe på flia. This is actually. I was always almost going to say I don't want to dox myself, but no one cares probably anyway. But this is actually quite close to where I live, so I could basically take a walk and look at
See the trolls.
Yeah, Kittelson's locations. A long walk, mind, but so I'm surrounded by this sort of atmosphere.
Let's see here. This is called.
He's playing Blindebukk.
This is from
Blind Man's Buff.
Yeah, and this is the Ash Lad down here.
Yeah, I don't know how the Ash Lad convinced the troll to play Blind Man's Buff with him, but they're
be winning.
Yeah, they're often quite easy to persuade, I guess. This is from the boy who had an eating competition with the troll.
Yep.
You see, he's holding the piece of cheese that his mother gave him, and he's saying, like, if you don't let me be, I'll squeeze you like I squeeze this white rock.
Yeah, he's fooling the troll into thinking he's incredibly strong.
Intelligence is not an asset for these trolls.
No, it's not.
If they were dumber, they would be like they would have an easier time surviving, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another version of the one we saw.
Yeah. This one is called Forest Troll. Yeah.
That's another variation on the two.
There is some difference in the size and scope of these. I mean, this looks just absolutely massive. That's like a regular size tree on the top of his head. This is like a mountain size. Where in some of these last ones, it's just like a very large human being. But this is like this.
Well, it seems to be like he either draws like the fairy tale specific troll, which is the large humanoid sort of creature, and then there's the mythical mountain spirit sort of forest troll that he's been painting like here. So and this one as well. I don't know what the reason is, but he seems to have two versions.
Yeah, he let his imagination go in many different directions, but I think it's fair to say that he really defined, anyway, the troll in the imagination of the Norwegian people.
Yeah.
Like no one had done before. There were others, of course, like his.
Yeah, but no one has. Well, his impact has certainly been very, very strong.
Yes, he had a real sense of the subtlety and nuance. Sorry, as well. Oh yeah, did I send you this?
Yep, you sent me a folder with Nøkken.
Okay, yeah, because this is the Nix, as it's called in English, in the Das Rheingold. It's by Arthur Rackham for the Wagner opera.
The Rhine Daughters warn Siegfried. Yep.
Yeah. But this is a very different manifestation of the creature that we call Nøkken in Norwegian.
Yeah, but the archetype is quite similar. It's the water female that lures you into her domain and then probably eats your soul.
The V thought.
Yes, the mermaid, the V thought, the siren, the
definitely
e-girl,
the luring part. I guess you could say Nøkken, and here we have Nøkken I never really conceived of Nøkken as a feminine sort of character, but
I always
it's
have.
inspiring.
I would say it's more monstrous than other depictions.
Yeah. So this is the most well-known, certainly, depiction of Nøkken. And I remember when I was a kid, I would often think for some reason that this was some kind of spider-like creature
Yeah.
on top of the water, but of course this is only the top of the head. And Nøkken lives in forest ponds, quite small lakes or ponds.
Not sure says that the water is always feminine and evil. I would disagree. Not sure. Water is chaotic, not evil.
I mean, Poseidon is quite a Chad character, as is Ulmo
that's
in
true.
Tolkien's Legendarium. But sure,
But
water
there's also
are certainly feminine,
sure.
usually, or always. This is Nøkken fishing. Yeah.
Yep.
Can you zoom in a little
Fishing
bit?
for humans.
Yeah, if you go to the last one first, skip ahead. This is Nøkken. Yeah, maybe you can zoom in, like Ludwig said.
This is her.
This is
taking
Nøkken
the form of a white horse.
As a white horse, indeed, and in Norwegian folklore, it is said that maybe this was used to scare children from going in the water without parents around. But Nøkken would transform into a white horse, for example, or especially, and the children would be transfixed by this vision and climb atop the horse's back, and then you see the results there.
Yep.
Wow.
They would jump into it. I think what's interesting is that the moss heads here in the photo are, I don't know if they're meant to be like evil creatures or if these are like former victims, but it's a nice touch.
Yeah, this is something you see in Kittelsen quite often, that in more or less subtle ways, he I don't think he like anthropomorphizes nature too much, but he definitely points to nature being besjelet, like nature has a soul in itself, and these characters, for example, really symbolize that.
Well, Nøkken is very effective. I remember being really scared of it as a kid when they showed me the pictures, and it's very versatile. It has something for everyone. So, like before puberty, you get the pony basically, and after puberty, it's like the e-thought that's going to throw you in the water.
Yeah, it's young and old. Everyone can share in the lesson.
Oh yeah. Light elves capture the shadow goblin.
Yep.
Skyggetussen. I don't
this
really
is more
know.
This is more esoteric territory. This actually, I've not heard about the Skyggetussen before.
No, I don't really know the provenance of that, but
here's probably the most well-known illustration of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, or King Valmon, as he's known, the bear, and of course the maiden on top of him.
That's from his later period, by the way. The last one you can see, not to go too far into it, but he had a very light touch with brushes, in spite of having a disease, that sort of neurological disorder. Anyway, this, I don't know this tale really, but it's called The Green Knight, which is, I don't know quite how...
Green Knight is it's a recurring story from other cultures, I think.
Yeah, because I was going to say I haven't read the Norwegian version, or at least not in recent years, but I'm a fan of particularly Tolkien's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is
I think it's English. I'm not quite sure.
Poem. Yeah, I mean, this one is from the one I'm thinking of is from circa 1400, an Arthurian tale, and I've read it 3 times. I mean, it's
Okay.
fantastic. But yeah, we can move on. Do you know what myrer is in English? I don't.
No, that's a very good. I was thinking about it. Hang on. Let me see if I can. Airy forum is
It's,
the
cotton balls that grow in the mire.
yeah
Yeah,
in the
swamp-like. Yeah.
in the swamplands. Yeah,
Mm.
I like this is a very like atmospheric picture, and it's not like this looks very fantastical, but I mean at the right time of day during the say the fall, this certain areas of Norway just look like this.
Absolutely.
This isn't necessarily like very embellished. Again, walk into the forest at night and you'll see why people believe in trolls. Here's a depiction of Soria Moria.
Yeah. This is very fantasy-like, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, of course, way before fantasy even existed.
Well, sure,
really,
but
with that name attached to it, anyway. But it's quite reminiscent of Tolkien's, even his drawings, actually.
mm-hmm. And this is the last one, the Golden Horn.
Yeah.
I like this one too. This is very high fantasy.
Yeah. And I knew this illustration or painting for a long time before I actually noticed the subtle anthropomorphized sort of mossy tufts and stuff in the landscape here.
Yeah.
I mean, it works without noticing it, but there are sort of creatures of the forest in
You
various
see it in
places.
here and a little bit here. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Grasping after him.
Yep, here the trees are sort of almost grabbing after him as well. Here's the face and the arms. Yeah. It's very interesting. And that's everything we have, I think. If you guys have any questions for us, I guess we'll hang out for a couple of minutes. And if not, we'll probably end it. But if you have any closing comments, Vingel or Luddigpath, now would be the time.
Not really. I think we covered quite a bit of ground here.
Yeah, I think this was a really fun stream to do. It's good to just have some feel good stuff and to just do some appreciation.
Yeah, I think that's important too. Part of preserving is to appreciate. So
yes, we're actually conserving stuff right now. We're doing it, guys. We're conserving. We conserve something today.
I'm gonna conserve. Yeah, okay.
I'm consuming. Okay.
No, but I was thinking a bit about, as I said, stories have been a thing lately. I say been a thing. It means that I know the Prudentialist talked about it on like a stream I tuned into for a couple of minutes, and then I randomly tuned into a Conscious Caracal stream where he talked about the importance of storytelling in the sort of the oral tradition sense, and being able to bring knowledge to future generations. And so I wanted to do a bit of cultural exchange, if you can call it that, which is one of the few things that we can actually use the internet for, to sort of just appreciate the story or sort of the mythos that we, at least here in Norway, have to lean on if we ever need to find any lessons or tell anyone else a story for that sense. Like if now you have access to hopefully a wealth of stories that you can impress your children with, if that's something you need in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Norwegian, you're duty bound to get the at least the Ivo Caprino DVD box set and show your kids, and also tell them these stories themselves, of course, like at the bedside table.
It's surprisingly unpaused. There's very little subversion in them.
Yep, very little.
There are, by the way, I don't want to go well actually at the end of the stream, but
Do it.
there are actually there is a collection of stories that Asbjørnsen and Moe didn't put into their collection that are quite explicit. Let's just say
really?
that. But I'm not going to say they're necessarily subversive for that reason, but a lot of folk
Just
humor
more
and,
adult.
body sort of storytelling in there for sure. Like they would send each other these tales by mail and just like underline, this is not going in the collection, just sending you on these stories. Yeah.
The
also,
Huldra erotic fiction stories.
Oh yeah. And also, I could add to what you said, Walrus, about the importance of stories. I got into sort of a back and forth yesterday with someone in a chat, like a stream chat. And, well, I would say that Heimskringla, or the Norwegian King sagas, are one of our foundational stories. It's also true of a lot of the stories in Asbjørnsen and Moe.
Right.
And his point was that, well, what's the relevance of these stories to today? And I'm sure you could sort of draw some relevance from them, but
hang on a minute.
What? Are you there?
I lost audio for like 5 seconds there. If you could just start the sentence over again.
Well, he pointed out that these stories should have relevance to modern man in a way, to the modern nation, because the nation is, of course, built around not only blood, but also culture, storytelling. But I would take the, at least on my individual level, the view that Tolkien does, that a story shouldn't be necessarily allegorical or transposable to whatever situation you're in. Like the spirit and atmosphere.
The spirit, the eternal truths, the timelessness, that's what make them...
Exactly.
If nothing else, it just becomes state propaganda, basically.
Yeah,
and
they are timeless. Like in spite of not, you can't just necessarily transpose it to hectic everyday life in Oslo Central. Like it's.
I mean, that's why Lord of the Rings works as well as it does. That's why we still talk about it today, and why people are still getting mad over adaptions being made, because the original work has a lot of those timeless, eternal truth qualities.
Yeah, I think things should be able to exist on their own, and sometimes that's hard to accept when you you want the pragmatism and you keep wanting to integrate your own life into these things. But like both of you said, when time passes away and new trends come up, these sort of really timely, relevant things, there's so many things that age badly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do we have some sort of questions, I guess, in the chat?
I think people seem to have gotten their fill of folktales. There's no questions today, so I think we'll just end it here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you're listening to this after the stream, thank you for listening all the way to the end. I know you're out there because I see the analytics, but there's only the hardcore, the most what should you call it, the strongest of you make it to the end of streams, which I understand. Usually when we wind down and the content is gone, there's not much reason to stick around. But if you're still listening, thank you. And if you're not already subscribed, you should obviously subscribe to A Walrus. You should go watch my other videos or the other streams we've done. I also usually tend to link my Twitter the telegram for the telegram for the Walrus chat, which I usually use as a mirror to Twitter, and most importantly the Longhouse Element channel, which is Discord but not past, I suppose. And I encourage you to join the Longhouse chat there if you want to share memes or just talk about things with the people who are floating around. I suppose this community, it could be called at this point. Yes, I mean you guys, Nordanon. But also the people that don't necessarily tune into the streams, but listen to these shows after they're published.
I would also just say when we're ending that I would encourage everyone to actually go and read these tales, because of course, this is a very superficial, in spite of our efforts, stream. Or
yeah, I mean, we spent 3 hours basically just explaining what they are.
Yeah.
Not really diving deep into any of them. Well, maybe except the East of the Sun, but even that could probably be expanded upon even more. I basically skipped the entire part about the winds, which probably is a bunch of hidden meaning and esoteric stuff in and of itself. So if you have the time, they're not usually very long stories. Like, Google around, go find them. Or there's a lot of books that have translated them to English. If you're not from Norway, you can get them and have a read.
Yeah, there's a lot more truth in a lot of fiction and myth, certainly, than in what we call facts today. So that's my last word.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you probably next week. Bye-bye.